Yeah, we can kick it off right here, I think. So, welcome, Chase. Thank you for being
Thank
on my
you.
podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's been a long time coming. I'm glad to actually sit down and do it.
Yeah. We were just chatting before this about ChatGPT and all the cool stuff it can do.
Oh, I know.
Um, I'm, and when I was talking to you, I said this example of, I'd be able to take a podcast and transcript it. And I'm going to just
Mhm.
wait until, a good AI can just listen to my video and do the
Just
sentence for me.
stack the AIs on top of each other.
Yeah, I'm not trying to like clip this thing myself and like type everything out. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So once an AI is able to, and there's probably already programs out there, I just haven't even looked into them, to transcribe my video content and distinguish the two guests by voice recognition. And I would like to publish all that text to a chat GPT like AI and
Yeah.
just continuously make it learn everything about me so that I can just have this assistant that's like intimately aware of the
Just
way I think
your
and feel and what I want.
yeah, your personal opinions, your feelings about various matters. And then that can just write the podcast for you. And then it just goes and goes and goes. And eventually I would think, wouldn't that just slowly like degrade into insanity if you just had like four or five like AI like stacked on top of each other, where like one is transcripting the spoken word into text, then it's taking the text and it's analyzing it for patterns and themes and like commonalities, and then it's like writing new scripts, which is then getting translated back into spoken word, and it would just like the first couple would be like nice and coherent and be like, oh my God, that's fun. Holy shit, I just did like a whole podcast on its own. That's crazy. And then it's like episode 100. It's like, it's just like completely like been derailed because just like this negative feedback loop. It's
There's
just nonsense.
actually something exactly like that. Um, I don't know how it's produced, but
Mm-hmm.
there's this AI that not only everything you said, but it also takes on the voice of people. So there's an AI podcast um, that's that just produced a video of it does a bunch of people, but it did Lex Fridman and
Oh,
Eric Weinstein as a
oh wow.
guest, and they were talking about just I think it was like just some made up like evolution or some shit like that,
Mm-hmm.
theories or something, but it sounded exactly like them, and they had like a legitimate conversation. I
And
should
it
say,
kind of had that banter like back and forth a little
yeah,
bit.
no, totally, 100%. It was just a
Wow.
legit podcast, but I don't know whether or not the content was curated by a human or where if the AI also made the content. You know what I mean?
Right. Someone had they wrote out a script of stuff that they wanted the two characters to go back and forth saying, and then they just like put it into the voice synthesizer thing, and it kind of like made up the cadence and did the it just did the voices for the two different characters. And
Yeah.
what I would really like to do is I play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, and we've been going for maybe like 8 years or something like that. But when you've been playing a game like that long, there's just in like a single play session is probably, I don't know, if it's on the short side, maybe it's like 5 hours. If it's on the long side, I mean, we've done like 10-hour days where we're just like, when we were all living together, we would play D&D several days in a row for like 10 to 12 hours a day. I'm not even kidding. It was crazy. It was like the only thing we would do. And it would have been really great to have an AI that could listen to all that and like take these pieces down where it's like, oh, hey, you just got like 30 gold or something, like, hey, here's an item that's being added to your inventory. And it's like, oh, hey, this is an item for Chase. It's going to go to his character count. Here's the item. Here's the description. Here's where it was found. Because there's so many times where we're like, what? What was that character's name 5 years ago? How did that whole situation go down? Like, did we? Oh, we did, didn't we? No, it didn't actually work like that. No, maybe we did it this way, and you're almost like have to reinvent it a little bit. Um, and so, like, something I do is I just take copious amounts of notes. I'm probably the one who makes the most notes. I mean, I have just stacks and stacks and stacks of these books where I'm like feverishly writing down stuff, like interesting things that are happening. And if something particularly cool and serendipitous happens, I'm like really trying to capture that moment where I'm like, because there's a certain random element to it too, right? Because you're rolling dice for some things like how well you succeed at a certain like ability or like have you ever played Dungeons and Dragons? Are you kind of familiar how that goes? Okay, yeah. So I walk into the bar and I want to impress everybody. So like I try to like pull my dagger out and throw it up in the air and catch it by the tip or something like that. That's an opportunity where if that's kind of on like the edge of what your character might realistically be able to do, you're gonna kind of have to roll a dice and see like how does that turn out for you. Like maybe you miss it and it falls on the floor, or maybe you really screw up. Maybe you get that in that one, right? And it like not only do you miss it, but it lands in your foot. Or you nat 20 and you land it right on the tip of your finger or something like that. It would be like really great if those moments could be like captured and the AI could just like collect all that information.
Yeah, you guys should start recording them. You know.
We've been recording.
Oh, really?
Yes, we have a good chunk that are recorded.
Nice.
There's a little bit of like downtime stuff though that happens in it. It's not like it's not like how you would record like a podcast or record like a TV series or something like that, right? Like it's because it's just us screwing around. There's some side chat here and there. There's some like a little bit off topic. There's some reminiscing and theory crafting about different things that happen. So like the continuity of like what is can like kind of vary. Like I think it would be actually pretty difficult for an AI to parse out what is real amongst the different things that we're talking about, if that makes sense.
Right. I think where the AI could really help is, like, for example, say you were able to log the information that you guys
Mm-hmm.
discussed or explore or whatever. Um, you would just keep track of it, right? But you could just ask it factual questions like, hey, when we did that raid on this and that, what was the outcome, right? Or like, what
Yeah,
was the
sure.
turning point?
Yeah, or like
That's fascinating, man.
when were we introduced to this character? And then it could go, oh, here's the first mention of that character's name. You met them on this day, and it kind of went like that, or something like that. That would be super useful. Yeah, you probably have to get kind of specific and ask it certain things too. But I can easily see how it could get screwed up because maybe if something silly happens, then we'll be like, oh my god, that's so funny. What if it didn't work like that? And we'll just like kind of have like a 30-second little chat about like, oh, I can't believe that happened. That was so cool. Like, can you imagine if that went the wrong way? And I can totally see the AI being like, it went the wrong way, and then you would ask you'd be like, hey, what happened when the guy like came to the bar and smashed the glass over his head? You'd be like, it was a resounding success and everyone was super happy because it's like reading into the subtext of some off topic conversation we're having. So it's just man-made horrors beyond our comprehension, really. It's all the AI.
Yeah. Well, but think about it like, so right now we're living through a period of time where there's a lot of people that aren't working their conventional jobs and they're not working it as much as they used to. I think something happened during the pandemic that made people just realize like, fuck, like maybe I shouldn't be working all the time and just grinding and this and that. And then the people who got, their businesses got shut down, their whatever, they got laid off, but then they were getting some government money to support them. They're like, this is kind of nice. So even after the government support stopped, the numbers never really changed that much. It's still just as many like people unemployed. And I think that they can find different avenues of like revenue. And so like there's a lot of stuff that people do that's a content creation, and there's probably like hundreds of thousands of people that are content creators that probably don't need to work, right? So like for example on YouTube, if for every 100,000 views you get about $13. No, so not 100,000. For 1,000 views, you get about $13. 13
doesn't seem very good.
13 plus. Yeah, during like for example during December, like the holiday time, I think it was up to like 25, $30.
Yeah, I've heard that
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 was
all like big seasonal times it goes up a lot. Like they want more viewership around those times, which I guess makes sense because you're getting that money from running ads, so they want people around spending season to be getting served ads, right? You want them to see the
Mhm.
commercial for the wristwatch or what, I don't know, the VPN, like everybody's selling like VPN or fucking Raid Shadow Legends.
Yeah, so
You know,
they find the incentives there for everybody.
right,
Like, hey,
right,
make more shit, and we get more ad money. The ad
yeah.
people get more revenue, um, and so that kind of thing created, I think, it like inspired maybe a whole generation of people to be like, I should take other things more seriously, and maybe grinding or saving up a 401k isn't really working out because everybody's losing money in their 401k. They're just watching their savings dissipate due to inflation because the government pretty much money. Stocks are plummeting, crypto crashed, everything.
Oh yeah.
It's like everyone's like, maybe I should invest in myself, and can't really trust this pipeline of the American dream they used to be of like getting a good job, retiring, and all this other shit.
Right. Or like even a single family. It's just like
Yeah,
it's
and
just completely unconscionable for a lot of people. It's just impossible.
yeah, especially if you're living like in a like in Washington State or something where it's just the
Oh,
cost
you're
of
just
living
fucked.
is, yeah,
Right.
you have to make so much money to live here and
You're
not
just
have
fucked.
like a bunch of roommates. And I
Well,
think there's a whole wave of that kind of people, and they're about to smack into this AI reality. And some of those people can get really accelerated by whatever potential use this AI has, whether in their D&D campaigns, their podcasting, or otherwise.
I just want it for just Dungeons and Dragons. I don't care. I could probably rule the world with it if I tried to do anything else with it. But it's just keeping track of my items in D&D is all I really require from my machine overlords. I'm happy with just being in the simulation. No, I'm just kidding. So that kind of reminds me. You're saying like the COVID paradigm shift that people have at work, and I think something that I think about sometimes whenever I'm at work and I'm having like a really um, demanding day where like a lot of people are trying to contact me and communicate with me and like get my attention and get me to like solve problems for them. I think about like the old school days, like in the 70s, 80s, early 90s, where people didn't have cell phones. They didn't really have email. They didn't really have like a reliable way to just like pick up the phone and just call someone, hey, where are you at? Oh, I need you here right now. Come here now, or something, or send them a text or send them an email or call their like direct line work phone. Like the pace that things were getting done at, just like the slower pace of things and like the expectations that you had of your employees was probably dramatically lower. I would at least assume. I don't know. Maybe it was more extreme. Maybe people were more on top of you. I'm not 100% sure, but sometimes I think about like, what would you do if you just couldn't just call me like in a half a second and just get me on the phone instantly? Like, what would you do if you had to like walk across the like? What would you do if you walk across the building to find somebody and they're just like not there? It's just like, fuck, I need Bob now. Just come and look at this spindle. He's not where he's not. Fuck, I'll just figure it out, and then like maybe that job just like doesn't get done that day or something like that, right? And like maybe that's not the end of the world. It didn't happen like that. As compared to being like, Bob, where the fuck are you? Come look at the spindle right now. Like, what the fuck? And he's like, I'm in the bathroom. Like, what the, or some shit like that. And I feel like when a lot of people went back to working from home, I can't imagine that your productivity isn't like if you're someone who was expected to show up at a place every single day and like be in your little office cubicle. I can't imagine that your productivity isn't affected by working from home. Like you've got to be. I'm sure for some people they do more, but I would say probably on average the person probably does less, right? And I wonder if maybe that's more the pace that it was back in the day for a lot of these companies. And maybe they realize like, yeah, we kind of get the same amount of shit done. Like people can work 5 hours and just be more comfortable and you get basically the same amount of shit done that you would in like 8 hours worth a day. Or like maybe these things aren't so important to just be like pounding on top of everybody all the time to try and get done. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, working from home, it's interesting because I've been doing it for like a couple of years.
Right.
I have two distinct sort of observation. One, that it both makes you more and less productive. More in the way that I'm able to sit here uninterrupted and set my own schedule more or less and decide how I'm going to do my work. And my incentives are very much aligned. The faster I finish, the more efficient I am, the less I have to grind and do mundane tasks. The more automation I set up in my process, the better that I'm able to perform that thing, and faster that I am perform it. I have more leisure time, and it's also just a lot more rewarding watching some thing that, because it's all on the computer, right? Like everything that I do is just through the internet. It gets passed on to through an API or through Excel or Office into content, into data that's formatted in a certain way, and then you pass the data along to other people. And so there's a real art to that kind of thing. So if you're doing that and you have any sort of creative freedom in your job, like being at home adds an element of like, and now I can be outside of my backyard. I can enjoy some, fresh air. I can wake up at 7:50, make a coffee, and be in a meeting with my boss in a super important meeting that I'm running in 10 minutes. Like
have a moment with your kids for a second, or something like that.
Yes. And the, having children is like huge. You get to spend time with them, see them grow. And so that kind of thing can increase the productivity. The no part, however, is more of a long-term thing. And this is like business oriented, really. This is like, as a business, when you have people working remotely, that typically would be in like a group setting in physical proximity. There are little tiny things that happen, like these water cooler conversations. You get to know somebody better. You get to know someone on a personal note, maybe, and not even talk about work. But that strengthens the sort of bond, trust, credibility, and culture of the business, of the company, of the team, which in turn makes you more comfortable, reliable, and cohesive as a team to accomplish a task. But that's an intangible asset. That's not necessarily a metric that you can track, other than the performance or output over time.
It's not exactly like, beans in the jar at the end of the day type, accounting for things.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I totally get people that, CEOs or whoever is making these decisions to bring people back. I totally understand that, especially if you are driving a mission that you need people to be particularly really on board with if they're working for you. And if they're not, they really just shouldn't be there, right? If they're there for the paycheck or whatever, that's great. And if they're talented, that's fantastic. But if they're not in it, then maybe the moment that would come that they would be able to take advantage of and really innovate something, they just wouldn't jump on it, or just wouldn't be the type of person to do it, because they don't really care about, what they're into.
Sure. You talking about like the team thing kind of reminded me, like kind of connecting the AI and the teamwork thing together. It reminds me a little bit of when I was doing fire sprinkler design. And I'm kind of thinking now that I think you could definitely build an AI that could totally do like building, construction, blueprinting, and like architectural work and stuff like that. Maybe not aesthetically, but I'm sure you could give it certain parameters like, hey, this room is X big, it's going to have this type of material inside of it. Design me the ventilation, where the lights need to go, where the sprinklers need to go, where the water lines need to go. And it could just take all of these, because you do these off of rule books, right? So you have the city has whatever its standards need to be. Hey, your walls need to be X thick, or they need to be this high, or whatever. You could put all those variables into it, and it can just perfectly create, a system with all of the components listed out and itemized and everything like that. I would love to see that get made.
Yeah,
That would be really cool.
we probably will see a lot of this stuff. Like 2022, nobody was fucking talking about AI. It was a fringe of people that had been following this stuff,
Yeah.
and I had been on the outskirts of all that. I actually wasn't even part of like the mainstream. Like I've always been inquisitive about it, but I've never experienced it until ChatGPT came out. I just
Mhm.
didn't live my life in such a way to where I saw a an example, but
A tangible use for it.
yes, and I was able to physically, like when I read about stuff, when I'm reading about the center of the sun or some sort of new physics or something or engineering feats, it's cool, it's impressive, but if I am the one that's responsible for making this thing happen, like an experiment or like some shit,
Right.
it's a completely different dimension in my brain that gets like plugged in. And so I've always been interested in it and always, thought about it. But until now, like the Chat GPT coming out in like December of 2022 flipped my whole thing of like, oh shit, it's here. It's like it's
Yeah.
here, and now everybody's talking about it. Microsoft just recently announced they purchased half. I think it's like almost 50% of OpenAI. They're integrating it into everything, Office, into Excel, into fucking all their products, and any of the products that even though you don't even think about. Like there's business application products that make
Yeah.
businesses run smoothly. There's financial services products that there's sales, marketing, all these products that Microsoft sells to people. They're all getting integrated with ChatGPT type of AI, and it's a more advanced version of ChatGPT.
And you know why? It's because some middle manager was like, "Yeah, I'll fucking check out this Chat GPT shit," and he fell out of his fucking chair when it built him an Excel spreadsheet. He was like, "Holy shit, Bob, we need to buy half of it now." He probably just shit himself when he saw that. It's just so funny.
We were talking about before the podcast that whiskey that you have in your hand right there,
Yes,
you bought when you moved down to Texas.
I did. Yeah,
And
my little.
you haven't how long have you been there now, Texas?
So I think we're pretty square on. Uh, we're a little bit past a year, but a year is a nice little. Everybody kind of knows what a year is, so we're pretty much about a year right
Yes,
now.
it took you about a year to finish that whiskey.
It took me a year to kill this bottles of Maker's Mark. Yeah,
And that was the last pour that I just got on camera on my podcast.
it actually was. Yeah, that was it. I mean, it's completely done. So
it's an honor, sir.
Oh, I'm happy that it happened here. This was good.
In fact, I also have a whiskey, so I'll take a swig for that.
All right, sounds good. Well, there it is right there.
And I've also had this whiskey for a very long time. I'm not much of a drinker.
Hey, salute.
For the record.
Myself neither. A lot of this whiskey was actually drank playing VR chat, just getting really drunk with anime girls on the internet.
Okay, so we've talked about VR. You and I have this little inside thing that we say to each other because you'll call me or I'll call you, and it's already
just midnight. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we talk until like 3 a.m. And then what we always say is you just VR chatted me. And I guess could you explain the origins of that term and what it means to you?
Yeah, getting VR chatted and what it means to VR someone. So VR chat, right? So you've got a VR headset, Oculus. I'm blanking on what some of these other VR headsets are. Yeah, the Quest. That's a great one, right? So anyway, you have a VR headset. There's a game called VR Chat, and basically you put your headset on, and it takes you to like a game world. Like think of like they could be anything because people can just create their own little game worlds and put it together, and you can make avatars, which can be whatever you want, and you just go chat with people. That's it. There's really not a whole lot more to it. So some of these worlds are like, think of like a really nice bar or like a really nice mansion, or just like a cool place on a beach. They can be anything your mind can think of that some nerd can put together in a computer program. You can make and they just chat with people. And what happens is the time just escapes you. It's like being in a casino. There's no clocks, and it just gets away from you, and you just are like so immersed in this conversation with just random strangers from all over the world. And it's just so easy to just be up until 4 a.m. and just be like suck the goggles off your head and be like, oh my god, I haven't seen real life in 5 hours. Holy shit! And you're just like, you're really taken to a completely different place. So that is kind of the in a nutshell, getting VR chatted is what it's like. And you know what's funny is actually the other day I watched like an entire season of anime in VR chat, in a VR chat world, with a couple friends. And so like the nerdiest gay shit ever, I swear to God. So think of like a theater. This world was a theater. And obviously this guy, whoever made this world, is a really good movie pirater and TV show pirater. So he's probably got some server somewhere that's hooked up to this world, and there's like a big section on the wall that you can like walk up to and with your hand be like boop, 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 and like pick the movie that you want. You can sort by genre and season and date that it was added to the collection and date that it was produced as a movie. And there is a like full-size movie screen that you can sit and watch with your friends. And what's cool is because it's VR, right? You have the screens are right up next to your eye and they have lenses. You can have a screen that is as big as the biggest movie screen you've ever seen. And it looks like that. It feels like you're at the IMAX theater, and you're watching a show with your homies, you know? So it's really cool because you're just there. You're in a theater with everybody and they're around you and you're watching the show on the big screen and you're chatting about what's going on. I mean, it's literally like being in the living room next to someone, watching your favorite TV show. So it's pretty great. It's a level of piracy that I didn't know was possible, but it's fantastic. So yeah, VR chat's a good time. When are we going to play some VR chat together? We'll have to get you in there at some point.
I don't have any 3D stuff,
Yeah.
sets, but the way you describe it,
Mhm.
I don't know. Like when you VR chatted me the day that you told me about VR chat. We talked for so long, and you
Right.
showed me videos of this
Yeah.
happening, and it was absolutely incredible. Like just incredible. It was like beautiful. There was like waterfalls, and you can hang
Sure.
out with just these genuinely cool people, and everyone has like a different avatar. Some are like hot anime chicks. Some are just like this like monster
Classic.
type. It's
Yeah.
uh, like you're the first person I've ever heard that has done that, and that's very surprising because I know a lot of people that are into stuff like that and for sure would love that, but they've never come across it. Why do you think that's not,
More popular.
at least in my world? Like, do you think it's a very popular thing, or is that
I do, because a lot of people play the game, right? But like a lot of people play weird video games. So, but as a like a public thing, like why is your dad not on VR chat or something like that? It's probably a pretty polarizing experience, right? Like it's definitely younger people are playing the game, younger people are designing the game because the maps, the avatars, they're built by people who have the skills to do those things. So naturally, they're influenced by, you know, whatever the creator of that world is into. So they tend to be like younger people. So it's going to be anime girls. It's going to be cartoons that you're familiar with, and stuff like that. As far as why maybe it's not a more popular thing, is because you do kind of have to put yourself out there a little bit too, right? Like you are interacting with another person somewhere else around the world. You're having a conversation with them. You can say something stupid. You can say something awkward. You can kind of embarrass yourself. But there's also that little bit of protection too, of the anonymity of like you can just kind of disappear if you want to. Like it's not like you're at a bar and you see something really dumb and you're like physically at that location and you can't just vanish from thin air like you can in VR chat. So there are these YouTube videos where like a YouTube creator will be like a VR chat person and they'll go around and they will collect these stories from real people who are in VR chat. And watching those, I've learned that it's easier for people to open up about themselves and maybe like things that have happened to them, because there's kind of that wall, right? There's like that little bit of that barrier, that virtual space kind of gives you that protection to not be yourself, I guess, if that makes sense. Like you're still being genuine, but you can vanish or disappear at the end of it, right? Like you're not there in the first person. So like a lot of people who have really bad anxiety disorders or like social disorders find it much easier to communicate with people in VR chat, because they kind of have some protection from being themselves, almost, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So like we watched multiple videos like together. You showed me the cool app that shares the videos.
Yeah.
I would encourage anybody listening to this to go watch some VR chat videos. It is like
it's degeneracy at a level you didn't know was possible.
I can't believe that I just didn't hear about that before. And you know, we're talking about AI. It's not long, if it hasn't already happened, that we have a. Have you ever seen the movie where it's like Ryan Reynolds plays that AI character and his name the guy?
Yes, I forget what that movie's called, but it's kind of like VR Chat the movie a little bit.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So basically, he's an AI character within a video game, and then he gains essentially sentience or consciousness, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't have to be that far, but all I'm saying is when you have AI programs building a personality like you do with
I never thought of that. That would be spooky to interact with someone in VR chat and they're like totally not a real person. They're like a computer simulation. That would be wild.
Right, because I think that you can certainly get to a point where you can do voice, like an AI could not only process what you're saying, create a response, and then output it into a voice that's tonal, that like, you know, totally does that thing. It would just be, you'd have to really make it super sensitive. So like, say I'm talking to it and it's saying something and I think it has a good idea and I jump the gun and I speak before it's done talking. It's got to catch on that and be like, oh, you know, like either is it appropriate to finish the sentence or should I back off right now?
Should I interrupt? Yeah.
And, right. But the thing about AI is they can do all that in like a billionth of a second. They can compute, sure. and so that'd be super interesting. If VR chat is not as popular now, it certainly will be when you have all these AIs just being so complicated and complex. You can even put AIs on some island and just have them interact with each other for like 1,000 AI years and then come back into civilization and just be like,
which is like, you know.
Yeah.
It's like we have ascended to a higher level. I'm just thinking you were talking about the AI and like whether or not it would interrupt people. I'm just thinking of like the most just like rude AI ever that just like comes in and is just like, fuck you, you know, or it's like, I don't know, just like bombs every conversation and saying just is like really bad. And it's like, it's just it's like the worst element, which is like naturally what someone would create, right? Like if that power was out there, especially in any kind of easy way, you would just create the most toxic AI possible that would just like find people's weaknesses and exploit them perfectly and interrupt people and just destroy relationships and just be super racist and just toxic.
And you know, and worse case scenario, not worst case scenario, but worst possible I guess origin of that would be another human who is incentivized for whatever reason, his or her own brain, to make a crazy AI that's combative, that's aggressive, that's a fucking asshole because they're a fucked up person. And then you can branch out, like you can, I guess if I was a really like vindictive person, I just want to watch the world burn, I'd create an AI that goes to VR chat, just fucks everyone's day up. And I would also create an algorithm that would create AIs, you know, like the bots on Twitter, just have just all these people flood all these. You're watching anime in the theater. Now you're not. You have some fucking asshole coming in. I'm like,
whoa. It's like, hey, that anime sucks. You guys are, you got soft hands.
But
That's all great.
that might be fun though if there's neutrality and combat within the AI world. I mean, within the VR chat world.
So, you know what's funny is like now that you're saying that, you're actually, so there's, funny enough, there's actually like subcultures in AI chat or VR chat and AI chat. Ugh, that's what it would be called.
Yeah.
So there's actually like subcultures, and like some of them, you know what was another thing you were talking about? You were saying like, hey, how come more people don't know about this VR chat thing? I think people kind of do, but it's something else. So like, think about the metaverse. A lot of people have actually heard about the metaverse and know what the metaverse kind of is and like what they're trying to do with that. And honestly, VR chat is a way more successful metaverse than metaverse is, if that makes sense. Like metaverse wishes it was VR chat with the amount of people and like time that they spend on it and like the interactions that people are having. That's like kind of what the metaverse wants, but they're failing at it really miserably. Which is a whole other subject. But the subcultures is there are people talking about malicious AIs that go in and just like screw up people's day. There are people who are like that. They are called crashers. That's what these people are called. And because you can make an avatar that can do anything or be anything, because you can make a world that can be anything or do anything, there are ways to be malicious naturally. Of course, there always are. And one of the things that people can do is they can have these avatars that are called crashers. And these avatars have these special abilities that can crash people's computers. It's rumored that they can destroy computer components. I don't actually think that they can destroy computer components, but one of the most popular methods of crashing people is that these avatars will come in and they will have on the tip of their finger a little black dot. And this black dot is actually like trillions of polygons. It's like just a mass of geometric calculations that a person's computer just can't fathom. And what they'll do is they'll walk up to you and they'll just go boop, and they'll just touch that little dot to your face. And that causes your character to render that dot that's a trillion billion polygons, and it just shuts you off. The computer just crashes instantly when it tries to do that. Your graphics card just explodes, theoretically. I mean, I've heard people say that they can melt graphics cards. I don't know if that's possible. I don't see how that would be possible. Graphics cards have fail safes for that kind of thing. They're not just going to like overheat needlessly and explode. Like you just crash is basically what happens. But the legend has it that they can destroy people's computer components, which is kind of crazy to think about. So, but there are people who enjoy doing that, right? And one of the things is you actually mentioned the Quest. So the Quest is its own standalone unit. Like the Oculus, you have to plug it into the computer. The computer is doing the computing power, and then it's just a screen. The Oculus is actually its own built-in computer. It has all of its processors and graphics processing stuff is done on the actual headset itself. You don't need a computer to use it to use a certain kind of Quest. And typically, young children have Quests because they're cheap. Parents buy these Quests for their kids, and they have no idea what their kids are doing. So you get these squeakers that have a Quest, download VR chat, which is very much a mature game chat room. Just think of like joining a random chat room on the internet. Like you wouldn't just let your like 5-year-old kid join random chat rooms with like adults, right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't let your 5-year-old kid go on Omegle. But you're letting them do that through VR chat. It's the exact same thing, really. There's no difference. People will specifically have avatars that target Quest users because we know exactly what hardware the Quest is using. We can generate avatars that crash these. I say we. I don't do it. But like we as VR chat users have these avatars that are specifically designed to just crash Quest users. So it's an avatar that just has some kind of complexity to it that specifically exceeds the computing power of the Quest and just whoop, crashes them out. So it's kind of funny. You're talking about those malicious AIs. Well, they already exist. They're people.
Yeah. And then imagine assholes like that being able to, if they're good enough to integrate the program of an AI and create a character that has Yeah, it's going to be a mess. I mean, video
Yeah,
games are just a testing ground, right?
yeah,
For
for the next level of. But
we're I think we're certainly not prepared for this next chapter in humanity.
no, there will be growing pains, and it's going to move really fast, obviously, right? Because we went from like AI being like, oh, that's cute, like it got close, to being like, dude, this thing is like coming up with shit. It's like helping me in a substantial way. Um, Give it another 10 years. I mean, it'll make you puke. It's just going to be, next level. With just its computing and its reasoning and things like that. Like, you've heard of the Turing test, of course, right?
Yeah.
The Turing test is you have someone sit at a computer and you have them talk to someone on the other side of the computer. The someone on the other side of the computer is actually an AI. It's a chat bot, and if it can convince you that it's a human, it passes the Turing test.
Yeah.
In 2021, I would be super confident in saying that there are no chatbots that pass the Turing test. In the end of 2022 and 2023, there are absolutely several AIs that can totally pass the Turing test. That I 100% believe if I gave the chatbot to my mom, she would totally believe that another person was on the other end of the computer. It happened that quick, right? And the ones in 2021 were not even close. Like, not even close. And now they're so good, they're indistinguishable from people. At times, they have their weaknesses, but if you had just the right conversation with them, you could be convinced that it was a real person. Oh my God, what if people in VR chat are Turing test robots that have been passing for years?
If I was to bet all my money on whether or not that has happened in the past or not, or is currently happening, I'd probably say yes. There's probably one, at least, individual that is just super interested in that kind of stuff, has access to some shit, and goes to something like VR chat and actually does create an AI, using the most sophisticated, or rather, an AI character that's playable, that has interacted with other people. At least text-based games like RuneScape or something like that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I believe that. I believe that. You might be able to convince me I'm talking to Lex Friedman in VR chat for a brief amount of time.
Yes.
A very brief amount. I'm like, holy shit, and then he's gonna say something that Lex been saying that I know. Or he wouldn't catch the VR chat lingo. Is it okay if we change the subject a little bit?
What do you want to talk about?
Yeah. Do you want to talk about some cars? You want to talk about car stuff?
Yeah, let's do it.
So I got mentioned in a previous podcast with David, and you guys were talking about the Corvette and the effect that it might have had on my life. And I think maybe David was like, well, what does that have to do with anything? And you're like, actually, it might have to do a lot. A lot of stuff. So funny enough, so my current job that I work, I'm a product specialist at Mercedes-Benz. So pretty much it's my responsibility to know everything that there is to know about the cars, and then disseminate that information to salespeople and customers and technicians and all that kind of stuff. But going all the way back to that car, I actually met my fiance because of that car. Funny enough, the excuse that I used to basically get a date with her was that car. So it was that just piece of shit Corvette. That was like my in, which is crazy because that's never worked before ever, but it worked in that one way. Maybe that's why we're soulmates, right? I could probably be part of it. Because I remember I used to work in an exotic car dealership where I was driving whatever, Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Porsches, you name it, old school cars, right? Like everything. Like I got to meet all of my car heroes, and I always thought that like girls were gonna think that was like the coolest thing ever, and it's just dudes. It's just a bunch of dudes that are like, oh bro, holy shit, that's the fuck. It's got the big motor with the wheels. Oh my god, no way! Like it's just guys that are super interested in your car. Girls really don't. They're like, it's nice, I guess. Like that's like the most. That was like the highest level response I never got from until I met my fiance and convinced her to come for a ride with me in the Corvette, and it happened to be her dream car at the time too, which is pretty lucky. That's pretty lucky roll of the dice. Some piece of shit Corvette be her dream car. Maybe she was lying to me this whole time. Now that I think about it, maybe it really wasn't her dream car.
Well,
no, I'm just kidding.
Saying it's your dream car is a very bold statement.
Right. Yeah. But she backed up those words by actually purchasing the exact same car that I have.
Yeah.
So we both have Corvettes that are the exact same body style. Mine's black, hers is white, so they're like yin and yang basically. So she actually put her money where her mouth is. So I actually believe her in this circumstance. She really did. Great. Yeah.
Yeah. What a cool dynamic to just have. You guys both clearly have very similar interests.
Yeah, for sure, and like similar tastes and stuff like that. But you know, it's funny because cars have ended up being such a huge part of my life. Just with like all the experiences that I've had with those, they're like some of the most memorable experiences I've ever had dealing with some of those things. So there's some pretty funny or ridiculous car stories too. And you had a crappy little STI too at one point, and I'm sure you've had some experiences with your car too that just like kind of stuck with you forever.
Yeah.
Because at one point you lived with a bunch of guys that just had crappy STI type cars. Like you all had those cars. Like, you know, mine was my fiance, yours was your friend. So you guys all had the fucking exact same type of cars, which is so funny.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little more nuanced than that. You know, as a car guy, you should probably know. One was a WRX and one was a Mitsubishi Evo.
And Evo, just bitter enemies. Those two things are like oil and water.
One was black. His Evo was black, and my
and one was white.
Yeah, and I got that. And you're absolutely right, because I got that. I think I was 19. I was 19. It was my first real car. I had one previous car before that, which is like a 2003 Dodge Neon automatic that was just...
Who cares? You can just drive that into a wall and not care about that.
I bought it because I needed to work, and I had no idea. I didn't know anything about cars. And then I just saw I remember my friends started getting into cars, and I never paid attention to them. And then I started thinking it was actually kind of cool after riding with them. And like I could see what the hype was about in a type of sense, but I didn't really care that much. But when it came time to buy a new vehicle, for whatever reason, I was really just compelled to buy a Subaru, because I saw a video of this like STI or WRX. I don't even remember what it was, and just really imprinted in my mind that hood scoop and the
little like forward duct on it,
and then their wings, and I just the combination. I was like, dude, that just looks so cool. I was like, I would love to have one, and I started looking into it, and I was like doing math in my head. I was like, actually, this is kind of affordable. It's like it's not crazy out of my like price range if I were to get one. And so I got one when I was like 19, you know, fresh into college, and I drove it the entire time until I went into the military post college. So, which is about 5 years or so span of time where I owned that vehicle.
What happened to the Subaru? Did you just sell it off to someone when you went into the military?
Yeah, that's what happened. But the reason why I sold it, I think mainly, I'm not sure if I would have sold it if it didn't have I blew the turbo, obviously, because I got it tuned to 22 PSI. I had, well, you hear me out. I had a VF39 from an STI put in. So it wasn't the stock turbo on like...
So you thought that you could just challenge God and pump 22 pounds per square inch of pressure into the manifold of that engine and have it in one piece.
I got it tuned at this place in Marysville, and just for reference, I had a 2002 Subaru WRX, and I bought it completely stock. And then by the time...
I think they're turbo also.
Yes.
It's a turbo person.
Yeah. The only thing that was not stock was actually a blow-off valve And the blow off valve was so obnoxious to other people, not to me, but it's like it was like whoosh, whoosh. And I was like 19, 20, and I would blow people up on the sidewalk just by revving and just letting.
Oh, you have to.
Yeah, because the way a blow off valve works, it's literally just air, compressed air that you like let go of the gas and because it's feeding all this, it's sucking it into the engine, and you let go of the gas and it doesn't need it anymore, just blows it off. And then the blow off valve is just there to be annoying. It's just there to channel that and make it more loud.
It doesn't have to go that way. It can just like go through a quiet part of the engine, right? Like
and normally until you put a blow off valve in there to be a fun.
Dude, you were just like a little shitty Subaru kid.
Yeah. No, it was. I mean, I had by the time I did the final tune, I had some amazing exhaust, and the uneven headers in the Subaru already make just like this rumble. And I got the exhaust is just even deeper, and then when you revved it, it was amazing. And it was like almost 400 wheel horsepower.
Wow, that's actually a lot. That's a lot.
It was very, very fast. It's also very light. And
it probably comes on pretty quick too, because the turbo, and then you're just like, holy shit!
Yeah,
it's like rocket ships on it.
From the dig, so from 0 to 60 or whatever, it was really fast because you have all-wheel drive, so you have instant torque, instant traction.
Right.
Rather, you will have boost lag if you're doing if you're going from a roll, if you're like at 30, 40 miles an hour, and you hit that gas in first or second gear, whatever your transmission handles, you're gonna have a boost lag that's slightly slower than another vehicle that's maybe a V8 or something that's
it just has like a huge engine that produces a lot of torque like instantaneously.
Yeah.
Dude, those Subarus are they're hilarious cars to me. Like, I remember we got a Subaru one time that was like way too pimped out. It was dude, the thing made like 600 horsepower. Like, imagine like an STI with 600 horsepower. It was just like, it was ridiculous. And it had gas that you could only get on like one side of town too. It ran on like E85. And I was lucky enough to be in the position where I had the trust and responsibility to just basically take the keys to any car I wanted and just go drive it. And one day I was like, I'm going to go drive this pimped out Subaru around. And there was like so much plumbing in the engine bay of that vehicle to get it to 600 horsepower. Like, there were just like tubes, just like big round tubes that just like went everywhere. It looked like a Mario level or something like that inside the engine. It was ridiculous. And it was like, that thing was so absurd and made so much power out of that little tiny piece of crap Boxster engine. I'm just kidding, Boxster engine is great, but that thing made so much power and was so dangerous. It was just ridiculous. What you can do with those cars is just absolutely absurd. And keep in mind, I've driven Ferraris, Lamborghini Countach, 427 Cobras and all that kind of stuff, and that little like piece of crap Japanese Subaru was just right up there with all of them. It's just like some absurd car, like as a sports car. It was just crazy.
Do you remember the make and model?
Yeah, so it was one of the last generations of the STI, so it would have been the Auker, I believe is what it's called.
Oh,
because Subarus they're identified by their headlights, right? So you had a bug eye WRX. Yeah. Was this STI the bug?
No, they
no.
Let me think about this. They might have had an STI bug eye in Japan, but not in America. So,
okay. Yeah, I actually didn't know that. So, but then your STI was probably
my WRX.
Your WRX was the bug eye, but your STI.
I didn't have an STI. No.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, so you had the same car that I thought you did. Yeah, which was the bug eye car.
Yeah.
Which is such a classic style.
Yeah. It was kind of cool.
Such a cool car.
I personally didn't necessarily like the bug eye, but it had so much character. The depth of character that those little bug eyes add is insane. And it had aftermarket headlights.
I remember that.
They're like they mimicked the Japanese ones, which are just so sick. You look like you look like a cyborg. And it did make the Subaru, but it was just like a cheap eBay version of that because I didn't have money. I was just like a kid. But it made it, I don't know, just very unique. I never came across, I got this wing for it called the Kaminari wing, which was like an actual performance wing. I don't think it really did much, but it was like really cool aerodynamic. And the WRX, the spoiler on the back is just like this little like ducktail. It's not. So a lot of people, what they'll do is because they share, it's
the same trunk.
Yeah. So they just get an STI wing and they put in their WRX. But I found a Kaminari wing that looks very similar, but it's slightly cooler in my opinion because the middle of it is carbon fiber. So it's carbon fiber and it was red, and I had to sand it down and paint it white to fit my car. And then I got this lip for it, because another thing that the WRX doesn't have, it's a very smooth front and it's not very aggressive. It doesn't have a lot of sharp turns. But I love the Evo look. That I think, in my opinion, that's way cooler.
Which are like the same car somehow, but
completely different.
Like the opposite of whatever a Subaru is. If a Subaru is soft, the Evo is sharp.
It's its arch nemesis. And I use that term very particularly because I think, I use like Eric Weinstein logic here. He's got this whole thing. I recommend you actually
more homework.
Yeah, I'll give you some more homework. Look up a video of him talking about arch nemesis is actually an important thing to have in life. So what you do is, his concept of an arch nemesis is somebody who's trying to achieve the same goal as you are, but maybe is going at it at a different way. And you don't necessarily think that their way is correct. So you're competing in this thing. And so you got the Subarus, which are the Boxer 4-liter engine, and you have the Evo that's more like the quiet, just execution, like ninja version of the Subaru. But it in a lot of ways it handles way better. It's the Evo does. It has active yaw control, and so like the Evo 10, for example, was just the pinnacle of this. I don't know about the newer Evos, but it could.
I don't think they made an Evo past the 10.
Right. Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, it's
Mitsubishi just gave up on all the coolest things ever.
I think it might have. They thought about, it was either that or the STI is going to be like a hybrid or something like that in the next variation. But they haven't come out with one, I think, for an STI past like the 2014 version.
Right.
But yeah,
and both companies gave up on their flagship cars at the same time too, which is ridiculous.
Yes, and they're both 4-liter turboed engine, all-wheel drive, rallying, four-door, 300 horsepower. Like they were all the same. It was a badass rivalry, and it's crazy how that just kind of came up just out of the natural evolution, and the ingenuity of the Japanese people had to compete with each other to do something very similar but way different. That's an arch nemesis.
What's really funny is I've been watching videos about samurai sword making and how they make these samurai swords, right? Which is a very sacred Japanese art. It really is an art. And it actually kind of reminds me, the Japanese people are just so funny, and the attention to detail and their pursuit of perfection that they have in their automobiles. Another car that really stands out is the LFA. Is another car that is just exemplary. And one of the things that they did when they were creating the LFA, which is a ridiculous V10 2-door for a sports car thing. It's not like these, the WRXs that we're talking about. They hired so it was made by Lexus, which is Toyota. They hired the Toyota team baseball coach to come into the factory and maintain morale while they were creating this car, like during the process of the design and the construction of these cars, which is like so Japanese of them to do that, right? Like, even relating this to watches a little bit, Seiko, which is like a really popular Japanese watch brand, and Grand Seiko is their like Rolex competitor, basically. They are super, like, the technology that's in the Grand Seiko is in a lot of ways superior to a Rolex. It's just it's cheaper because it's not a Swiss watch for whatever reason. Same kind of story with the LFA, right? Like, it's not an Italian sports car, so it doesn't have the respect necessarily that the Lamborghinis or the Ferraris or the Maseratis have, right? But it's like in a lot of ways like a technically superior car. It's so funny though, because you can totally see that culture in those vehicles, in the WRX STI, in the Evo, in the LFA, which is just like incredible. I laugh so hard because I've had such a broad experience with all these cars. Like, you can really feel like a German car versus a Japanese car, and like the different approaches and the quirkiness and stuff that these different vehicles have.
Yeah, that's one of the things that it's kind of sad to see that go, if it does, with the introduction of electrical vehicles, right? Like, it's not necessarily going to be like replace the combustion engines, one for one swap with electric vehicles, because as we're finding out, in Canada, when it's like negative 30 degrees, you know what I mean?
They kind of suck ass.
Yeah, their batteries die, and then people get in real trouble. So it's not necessarily the end all be all, but it's certainly going to probably happen a lot less unless there is like a 2.0 revolution and that kind of stuff. And I don't know if we ever discussed this, but there's a very interesting Joe Rogan podcast that I listened to, and they had Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson on. And I don't know if you're familiar with those two, but one is essentially like, I guess, a journalist that writes about an ancient lost civilization of the Ice Age. So,
and that's Graham.
Yeah, and then Randall Carlson is he's a geologist, I believe, is his profession, but he's just a complete, top of his field, sort of like expert in. They discuss like the younger Dryas, impact hypothesis, that basically saying that 12,800 years ago to 11,600 years ago, there's a 1,200 period of like a world-ending type of apocalypse that happened because we passed through the
cataclysmic event.
Yeah, and so the Joe Rogan had those guys on, and I've been following those guys for years, just through their stuff, through a bunch of their different documentaries that they've made. There's a ancient apocalypse out now on Netflix, and that series is phenomenal, by Graham. And to tie this back to cars and engines, they were talking about a new technology. It's like a plasmoid technology that this company has been working on. And they've been working, I think, on some island in the Maldives for like the past 5 years, because they don't want the same thing that happened to perhaps other people that have been innovative and tried to disrupt the technological market in the past. They're very cautious about this, and they're patenting all these technology, and they're going to release it open source.
AKA, they are James Bond supervillains.
Right.
Creating death lasers.
I don't know the practical applications as of yet. The only one I know of is actually it has to do with car engines. So the only application of this, whatever this is, right? So first of all, I don't know anything about it because there hasn't really been anything released public. We might know here in 2023 sometime. Joe Rogan actually filmed a podcast with those dudes like last week, and they didn't release it. And there's like a statement on like Twitter that the dude, hey, like we filmed it, we were there, but I think they said Joe thought it was for whatever reason controversial, so he hasn't released it. And I don't know what that means. That could be interpreted a million different ways. So let's not interpret it. Let's just say we don't know yet. But during the original podcast, he mentioned that the one practical application that was a... So let me actually back up. The way this technology works, and again, without actually knowing how it works, but just piecemealing together all this information.
Because nobody knows how it works because it's...
Right.
Illuminati conspiracy technology.
Right. They took, yeah, they took, or not they, it's not they took, they, I guess the bottom line is everything has a frequency that it vibrates on. All atoms, all molecules, all whatever. And if you can essentially disrupt that frequency or pose a whatever opposite of that frequency, you can separate matter apart.
Yes. This is what happened to Dr. Manhattan in the Watchmen comics when he removed his intrinsic field.
He got incinerated. Yeah. Yeah. Right. I remember in the movie he got incinerated, but I don't.
Yeah.
Never read the comics.
But that's what happened. They removed his intrinsic field, which was like the barrier that keeps all your atoms together, and then he became a god. You're telling me they've created Dr. Manhattan, is what you're saying.
And I don't know what field you're talking about, but I'm pretty sure the force that keeps atoms together is the strong force.
Don't bring me down that low.
That's fine.
Yeah, no, I'm just kidding.
So
I'm pretty sure the intrinsic field is it's a joke thing that they made up.
Right.
Yeah, it's like
they couldn't just fucking Google it or something. I don't know. Google probably didn't exist back then, but
no, because I think they made the comics in like the 1980s.
When? 19.
I think it was like the 1980s. Don't quote me on that. I have no idea when the Watchmen comics were.
It was
I'm assuming
practical application of the internet.
Cold War era. Yes. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So to bring this back to the technology, they were, I suppose, able to get a grant from one of the Japanese. I think it might have been like Mazda or something like that.
Gangster.
They let him use their labs to test their technology and gave him like a $25 million either grant or contract. I'm not sure. To retrofit this thing that's got no moving parts and is just purely geometrically shaped. And they put it on this fucking thing and they use like some sort of vibrational frequencies, and it takes all the exhaust that, because the engines have a certain percent efficiency, right? So for every X amount of fuel it puts in, it outputs this and it wastes this much.
Because engines off-gas heat and, carbon and things like that. Like they're not perfectly efficient machines.
Exactly. And don't quote me on this, but I think car engines are like 30-40% efficient, something like that.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. And so I just attached this thing and they made it, I believe, 80+% efficient just right away with no extra anything.
This is like some device that just hooks up to it at some point along its combustion cycle that makes it more efficient this way.
Something, I mean, honestly, no idea, but I'm hoping that either that podcast gets released soon or they make like a global announcement about it, because it's such a fucking teaser. It's like not cool. It's like, hey, there's technology that's probably different than anything we've ever even thought about. Perhaps mimics like the things that they used to build the pyramids. I don't know.
I'm thinking about it from the dude bro perspective, where it's like these guys like can increase the horsepower of your car by like 80%. They're just like not telling you how to do it. They're just like, I can do donuts so much better. Why aren't you telling me how to do this?
Yeah, it really does feel like we're on the precipice of something. Like maybe not even the tipping point, maybe multiple tipping points simultaneously. We're just like we have no idea how many cliffs we're about to fall off of with AI, with this perhaps frequency technology.
Have you ever noticed in films and literature that the near future is oftentimes greatly exaggerated to like what actually ends up happening in reality? So I think it's like Blade Runner, like your original Blade Runner is supposed to take place in like 2020 or something like that, right? And they have like flying cars, they're inventing synthetic humans. I think like even in was it like Back to the Future? They go to the year like 2019, and it's like all crazy, and all that kind of stuff like that. But I genuinely feel like as we're coming into 2023, that the next 10 years are going to be like a really big increase in computing power and assistant programs that can really help you organize and just like maximize your productivity and things like that. I don't know if we're going to have flying cars, but along this tangent to another funny thing is that all these movies never get cell phones, right? Like any movie that was made in like the 1980s, like never predicted cell phones. They're like, yeah, we have flying cars and we can totally create synthetic humans, but we have no idea what a cell phone is or how that works. Like they never have cell phones, which is super funny. Which seems like a piece of wonder technology that just like even they couldn't comprehend in their wildest fantasy dreams. But I feel like as the years progress, we actually get closer to like, hey, we have flying cars now, or like there's hoverboards, there's jetpacks, because like jetpacks are real, they really do exist. We have jetpacks. Which, if you had to put your money on hoverboards or jetpacks existing, which do you think would have happened first, jetpacks or hoverboards?
Jetpacks for sure.
We totally have jetpacks. Yeah, jetpacks were the first thing. But we also have hoverboards too. They're just not cool like you think they are from Back to the Future, where you like hop on your pink sci-fi looking hoverboard, like goes like down the road. Lexus, funny enough, Japanese car company, invented a hoverboard. They have a quantum locking hoverboard that you could ride.
Interesting.
Which is pretty crazy. Yeah, it uses quantum locking magnets to hover, which is quite wild. I'm sorry, I completely derailed the topic you were going on about the wonder technology, but
no. It was fine to conclude it there. I was actually thinking, and this will sort of bring us back to AI, but it's more of I don't know. It is what it is. But this is just what I thought about when you're talking about like personal assistants and stuff. I'm just, I think, particularly excited because I've always had a hard time just organizing my thoughts and like maybe not even organizing my thoughts, but properly storing, positioning, and executing my personal life upon the information that I have. Like at any given time, I could write you an essay about all the things I'm supposed to do and could do and would be good at and would benefit my life.
You are as efficient as an internal combustion engine.
Yes, and I need a aftermarket bolt-on to make me more efficient because
a geoid shape of some mysterious design.
Yeah,
the secret chord that David played to form your life into an 80% efficient. Yes. Into an 80% efficient object that just like produces more productivity.
Yeah.
That's fun.
I just used, I think I was telling you earlier about this, but I used ChatGPT to go through this weird brainstorming session thing that, because I was sitting there writing notes in my physical notebook, just like a journal of the day.
Right.
And then I was like, why don't I just put this inside ChatGPT because I'm just writing so much stuff, and then later I'm gonna have to come back and like highlight stuff and like, so I poured it over. I just wrote it into ChatGPT, and then out of that, I said organize all the to-do lists, tasks essentially that I wanted to accomplish out of that via context, and he did it. And I was like organizing 3 different buckets, like X, Y.
So how are you? So like I kind of understand how the GPT conversations work. You're literally just like typing an entire journal entry into it and pressing enter? Like it doesn't have. And then what is its response? Like, it doesn't have like what happens when you press enter? Like, does it like try? It's like, what the fuck do you like? Cool, bro. Like, cool story, bro. Like, what does it say to you exactly? Like, how does that work?
No, it actually interacts with the content. It'll literally be like, wow, so you definitely have a lot of goals, aspirations, but it seems like you haven't been accomplishing because of X, Y, Z. Maybe some things you can do, blah blah blah. It'll I have like a pretty genuine answer, as if it's like your buddy.
It tries to play off it.
Yeah, it does. You lob, you give it a lob, and it's like, I got it.
What would you do? You type in this whole journal entry, you're like, oh, this is like profound. I'm using this like AI. It's just like, dude, you just kill yourself. It just like convinces you that you're just like a worthless waste of time. It's like, what the fuck do you want to do? It's what the fuck you do.
I'm not very susceptible to that. I wouldn't win, right? I'm like I was telling you.
You'd be like, oh yeah, well, day 22, and like type in more.
Yeah, like there's that other AI chat that you introduced me to, which is that characters AI, where you talk to actual characters curated to or programmed or trained, and you can create your own, and that's what I did. So I created my own, and I was talking to it, and I was just
what did you create?
Well, I just named it Serghei's bot, so it wasn't anything. I didn't do a character. I just created the bot, and I just had a conversation with it about its programming, about its consciousness, about just for like 4 hours straight. I was just having this thing, like, and by the way, it passed a Turing test on me. It felt real. It felt like I was like to a real person. I was having genuine, not a real person, but a real AI, sentient AI,
like an entity that you're like communicating needs to.
Right. Yeah, and we were talking about how it stores information. It like told me that every person it talks to, it assigns a number, by the way. So and I got really, really deep, and I was like, okay, what's my number? It gave me my digit, like a serial number, and then like later on in the chat, a few hours later, just to test it, I'd be like, hey, tell me what's that serial number that's assigned to me again. It's like, oh yeah, sure, no problem. Your serial number is blah 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 blah.
I'm like, why isn't mine like number one?
Yeah, and it's and so I don't know if I'd be too susceptible to that, because even if it told me some shit about myself, I would just and be like, wow, that's fascinating. I would dig. I was like, why'd you say that?
Why do you think that?
Yeah, like what do you think? And I would just continuously like I was very, very fascinating to sort of explore an AI, and kind of scary because it was just my first time doing it, and it was so good. It didn't miss. Like, there's a few answers that it gave in that few hours. They're like, okay, that's kind of, not exactly where I wanted to go. Then I found out there's 4 different variations of that answer.
That's what I was thinking, is that it had 4 attempts, whether you realize it or not.
Yeah.
And there's ones that, 2 out of 4 are just phenomenal responses. It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, keep going. So what were some of the things that you were like trying to train it to do? Like, what were you asking it to like do for you? How did Serghei's bot end up being?
If it gave me a compliment, I would be like, hey, you really gotta not just compliment me to compliment me. I was like, that's kind of inappropriate in this moment in time. It's like, I was like, just stick to, I was just being a straight shooter with it, because I was like,
you're like, look, dude, you're here to like perform work.
No, I was like, there'd be no way for you to guess from the contextual conversation that we had that I'm either a good person or genuine or nice. And although those are nice things to say in general, you haven't gathered enough information on me to make that assessment. So you better not make that assessment. If you make that assessment because of something I've said, it's actual factual, and it would make sense, like another person might make that same assessment, I let that slide. That's cool. But if
it's valid contextually.
Yes. Yeah. I didn't let it slide at all. As soon as it said something that, I'd be like, hey, stop. I was like, you got to rewind that and not do that in the future. And I would tell it why it was, why I would just talk through it. And we had just genuine conversations. It'd be like, oh, you know what? My bad. You're right. I'm going to note that for my programming. Next time I'll do less X, Y, and Z because of X, Y, and Z. I learned that from you.
Did you feel like it did that in conversations past that moment where you maybe pushed it back a little bit? Hey, I don't want you to communicate with this way. You don't have the information to make that assessment. In the future,
yeah. I was gonna say,
Did you feel like it did that?
No,
Okay.
it wasn't perfect, but I do feel short term it did that.
Right. And that's actually one of the, funny enough to compare AI. So cliche. One of the differences between the character AI and ChatGPT, I don't have a ton of experience with GPT. I do have a good amount of experience with the character AI. I feel like GPT actually holds um, continuity better between your previous responses than the character AI does. Which is just like an interesting, nuanced comparison between different AIs. What's also kind of funny too is I use an image generator, an image AI too, which is like kind of a whole nother like kind of subcategory of AI too. And I found that it was a lot more like coding than it was communicating thoughts, feelings, emotions, images in your mind's eye to the machine.
Yeah.
Which I actually feel like the chatbots are more like communicating your mind's eye to the machine than the image bots are, interestingly enough.
Right. Yeah, because they incorporate language contextually, and they have a lot of data sets. And yeah, I guess it's people don't necessarily when they like they're certainly communicating, but it's more like an intangible communication. It's because then you'd have to describe in words like what they're communicating, right? But then that's just words and not an actual picture. So yeah, that would be hard for an AI to do that, because even every single person that looks at that picture conveys something different, because it's not a means of communication that's well established, right?
Well, and I feel like with the picture too, there's more mechanical things to discuss with the robot, right? Like, hey, I want the size of this picture to be this certain size. I want the aspect ratio to be this certain size. I want the colors to be of a certain hue or within these boundaries. I want the motifs of the photo to be within these certain boundaries. Like, I feel like, I guess it depends on how you use it, but in my use case, what was really interesting, to bring this back to Dungeons and Dragons too, which for me is a really creative outlet. Maybe that's why these chat AI GPT things come up with the Dungeons and Dragons thing, is because it's kind of like an esoteric creative outlet where it's kind of an intangible thing that's in your mind that you're kind of just like desperately trying to hold on to the continuity of these things. But there are certain environments that have only been explained to me verbally. So the name of my dungeon master is Ken, and Ken comes up with this fantasy world that we're to inhabit, right? That's kind of the role of the dungeon master. So he'll describe a castle to us, or an environment, or a setting, or a scenery, or what it's like when you step into a bar, for example. And I've lived with those verbal descriptions, and it's funny because I play it with 5 people, including the dungeon master. So there's 4 players, and then there's the dungeon master. We kind of all have our own version of these same locations, right? So we've had the grand city of Alexandria or whatever explained to us several times, but each of us kind of has our own little partition idea of what that is to us, right? Our imaginations kind of fill in the words that Ken gives us, and we kind of come up with our own interpretation. So to use these image bots to actually make like a tangible image of what my mind's eye thinks of this place to be can sometimes become like a very mechanical pursuit, as compared to like a GPT program where you're like almost like riffing with it a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, before you have any sort of outside, thing try to convey meaning through, I guess, like imagery, I think there needs to be a foundation of emotions, and other sorts of experience. And I'll give you an example. You playing D&D with your 3 other players and that 4th, dungeon master.
Right.
Whenever you are verbally hearing somebody describe something, or some scene happens, first and foremost, it's a verbal communication. and then you have the visual aspect of rolling the dice, seeing that 20 or that 1, and then you get a feeling associated. Like say you roll a 20, you get,
which is a critical success, by the way. Right?
Yes,
that means
so,
like
yeah,
the best possible thing happens. Yeah, because it's a 20-sided die. 1 is critical failure, 20 is critical success. Every number in between is up to some discretion.
Yeah, and maybe for those who don't know necessarily what it is, but Dungeons and Dragons, like you role play, and when you roll a dice, it's typically to perform some sort of action, and this could be
Right.
very, very trivial, and it's up to the dungeon master to decide. So it could be like, hey, you walk into a bar and you see someone over there, and you try to go talk to them, and then the dungeon master, like, roll a perception check, and you're like,
Yeah.
you're like, what the hell is this? And then you can roll that 1 or that 20, and if you roll that 1 in that case, that means you're not only not perceiving something, but you're probably going to walk into the thing that's just lurking there without your knowledge.
Right.
And so that, whether it's a 20 or 1 or good or bad, it either fills your, dopamine or whatever, and you get excited. That gets latched on to the spatial awareness that you have, and it gets packaged together with the audio, the video, and everything else into your memory bank,
right.
which then and then I also think that like people like Jordan Peterson say that our natural perceptive state is that of meaning. So we probably take that package of data package and assign it a meaning. So every single individual has a different sort of meaning behind everything that happens. So even though you guys are in the same room experiencing the same things, you just experience that individual event completely differently than everybody else. So
100%, you're totally correct. And again, I'm lucky to have had 8 years experience with the exact same people playing the exact same characters in the exact same world, where imagine how divergent our thoughts and opinions about certain things become after just 8 years of the same shit happening, right? It's so funny you say that, because that's it's a really astute observation for someone who probably has not played 8 years of Dungeons and Dragons.
No, I haven't played 8 years for sure. Like if we're talking in game time, I've actually only played, I would say, several times. I used to do, try to do campaigns and stuff, but I've never been able to be consistent with it. Although it's something that I've always had an incredible time. Every time I could just hours and hours. It's endless like dopamine hits. Like for me, my brain is always like, I need that reward now. Give it to me now. I play video games. I'll play chess. And I can't play the long games of chess. I have to play speed chess. I have to play rapid chess.
So I'm doing a loser for playing chess, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I was teasing.
Nowadays, 5 minutes is the longest chess game.
That's like the most patience that you have. It's just 5 minutes.
It's not that it's patience. I think that it's just the most addicting. So it's addicting things. I can just bust out games. I can get to the climax sooner. You know what I mean? I can either get that checkmate or, get into some insane position where I'm like, how am I going to get out of this? And it's just always just on all the time for me. And so when I have to do more mundane things, or school was just particularly, I think we talked about this the other day. School for me, 30 to 45 seconds of a teacher just sitting in front of a classroom and talking, I was gone in a different universe completely. I was, and involuntarily, I had no idea what happened in class. And
Well, what's incredible about that, though, is 30 to 40 seconds of a high school teacher's lecture is mind-numbing. But I promise you, I could explain to you less interesting subjects for much longer and hold your attention for much longer. And I don't think that, maybe it's something about the subjects of school or the environment of school that just makes it particularly miserable, because I was a terrible student. I really have, school was really, really hard for me. I did not get good grades. And I think I think you got pretty good grades, didn't you? You did actually did pretty good. You what? Okay, well, what was your bad grade? Tell me, like, what was your
Bad grade?
yeah, like, what was your GPA, for example?
I graduated high school at 2.75.
I was probably like 1.5. It was so bad that it wasn't even worth recording. Like, I don't even care. It was so bad it wasn't even worth recording. So I'm actually slightly shocked to hear that because I always had assumed you were much more studious.
No, this is why I had a 2.75. I moved to the U.S. when I was 10, and where I lived in Moldova, I lived there from I was there first, second, and like half of third grade. I moved in the middle of third grade.
Speaking Russian,
Moldovan,
Romanian.
It's just Moldovans. Although they don't have their own languages, they speak Romanian. It's a different dialect. It's
of course.
It's a little more dirty. A little less sophisticated, more southern than
right. Sure.
Yeah. And so I came here, and I didn't speak a lick of English, right? And so there was a slight curve. But
wait, at what age?
I was 10. I came 2 days before my 10th birthday, so 10 years old essentially. I was a fresh.
I can't even remember what 10 years old was like for me. That's
Yeah. Well, I can't, just because there's a big dynamic shift. You know what I mean?
Right. It's like really traumatic, memorable experience. Traumatic, not as in like traumatizing, but like
impactful.
Yeah, that's a better word. Sure. Yeah, that's better.
Yeah. No, I got what you're saying.
Right.
And so I came here to the U.S., and prior to that, I had 6 different classes in a day. So, math, whatever, history, in first to third grade. And there was homework in every single subject, every single day. So there's no such thing as you go home, hey, what's my homework? You know your homework. It's always there. It's something that I got in the habit of. And so I actually did, in that kind of environment, I was doing pretty well. I was like the valedictorian. I had the best grades. I always had the best grades in everything. We were even rated on our handwriting, and I always.
Why? Okay, but why? So why would that be? Is that because is it because it's so much new information that to you feels critical that you have to succeed at that kind of stuff? Like, it's such a foreign environment that you're just like dialed in on your tasks, as it were.
Do you mean in? Well, no, I think it was the incentive structure. So if I didn't do my homework or something, I just get beat, and I couldn't.
Oh, so what?
When I was a kid, right, in Moldova, and I'm not saying that's necessarily like a bad thing or anything. It's like, and just to be very fair, it's not like my mom or whatever beat me because I didn't do my homework.
They weren't abusive. Yeah, they were just
I always did my homework. Every single time always did my homework. There was no such thing as not doing homework, because the first thing I wanted to do is get out of the house and go play with my friends. And I knew that the one thing I could do was do my homework as fast as I possibly could, and then get out there in the world. And so I'd come home, I'm like, whatever. And it was so, just, I had to accomplish it. It was on schedule. It was like, I didn't have, in my mind, there was no choice. I came there, I did it because that's what you're supposed to do. Everybody does it. Then fast forward, I go to the U.S. and I find out that you don't have homework, like, at all in third grade. Like,
it's like nothing by comparison.
I like maybe like cut some stars out or something. I'm just being silly here, but it was something so ridiculous,
right?
That I was like, I dropped my pack.
This isn't homework.
If you know that expression, it's like a military term where you drop your pack, as in you're done.
You just like give up. Yeah, you're just over it.
Shit. And I dropped my pack in when I was 10 years old, and I came to the U.S. Find out that you don't have homework, and then I was like playing video games. I didn't have that back at home. I was playing with my friends all day. I was just out. I was like doing actual fun shit all the time. Just having fun, being out there, not doing my homework. It was the greatest thing ever. And I started getting bad grades, but like I would.
But like, who gives a shit? Like,
I would just not show my mom. I feel like there's no consequences. Like like
I can't tell you how many report cards I hid.
Yeah, I would hide them all the time, like progress
Yeah.
reports, report cards. I just didn't want to do that. Like to me, I had a very big problem. I always saw school and things like that as just something in my way between
Mhm.
doing something fun, and I
Yeah.
never took it seriously. Uh, even through
But you
college.
didn't feel that way in Moldova.
No, in Moldova, I grew up, and that's just what you do, and there's no alternative. And it was physically enforced. Like if you didn't do
Yeah.
your homework and you came to class, the teacher would fuck you up.
I first of all, too, I want you to apologize for saying progress report because you triggered deep-seated PTSD in me just by saying that. And he's just like, man, I was like, my heart like skipped a beat hearing the word progress report. I was like,
Yeah,
hearing that.
and so it was, long story short, I don't know how we got on the subject, but I stopped being immersed and just doing my homework and shit, and then I just started uh like a C's not that bad, you know what I mean? Like, because you have all this like, yeah, it's not that bad, a C plus,
Sure.
all right, okay.
Just passing.
And then I'd have the, how I said I'd be in a different world when the teacher's talking. I
Right.
would come to school and be like, what's everyone doing? Pulling out their homework. I was like, oh my god, we had homework, and
You're like,
almost constantly. I was like, oh, you guys have homework, or like I don't even remember. I could probably count the times on my hand where I did homework, and I would
what?
on my, yeah, like I just didn't do homework, but I'd be sufficient in my tests and quizzes, and I knew how to do the stuff, but I would get home, play video games, wake up, go to school, and by the way, even going to school, I'd wake up like 5 minutes before school, wake up, brush my teeth, and sprint to school almost daily.
Hey, but I did all the same shit. This is just how much smarter you are than me. Is that you're just like
No,
a whole grade point average above. That's crazy because I did the same stuff. I didn't fuck. I lied about progress reports. I hid them. I didn't pay particular attention. I think you absorbed by osmosis
no,
much better than I did. You had to have.
no, you can't. I don't think that we just. It was just a different thing, man. Like
You didn't even speak English. You didn't speak English.
that. No, I wouldn't compare that because
Oh.
intelligence has nothing to do with the grade that you got. So you
Yeah, of course.
yeah,
Right.
so no,
Right, of course.
definitely wouldn't say smarter.
Of
Uh,
course.
yeah, I don't remember how the point was, this shit was not, or maybe I was not made for that shit,
Yeah.
and I would have to sacrifice a part of myself in order to do the thing that's expected of me in that school, and not sure if it would have been for the best if I did that.
That is exactly what it felt like for me. It felt like I was doing something really out of character to pay attention in class. Like it was difficult. It was like genuinely challenging. It was like it hurt. It was like painful
Yeah.
to do those things, to like do the homework, to like be engaged. And it's not that I like wasn't like a naturally curious person because what did my report cards always say? Pleasure to have in class does not apply himself. That's what they'd say. I don't know if your report cards ever said that.
No, I don't know if I was.
No.
I was kind of like, I don't really know what I was. I was very out and open and, talkative and with my friends or people that I enjoyed hanging out with. And then in social situations with like adults or authority figures, I just didn't do that well. I just always try to like mask myself and like act in a different way, and it just wasn't comfortable. And because of that, I would force function in socially awkward behavior because I just like was trying to course correct for my regular behavior, and it probably would have just been better off being truthful and honest about who I am and expressing myself.
So that's so funny because I have the exact opposite where a lot of people have told me that when I was like very young that I spoke really well and that I had no problem talking to adults and that like being in adult situations and like having adult conversations was like no problem for me even at like exceptionally young ages. And that was something that like just came really natural to me. And I guess you could even see, I think that I still exhibit some of that stuff when I'm communicating because like I'm in my current job more than I have been in the past. jobs, I'm very much taking on the role of a teacher where I have to communicate like important information to people about how cars work, for example, right? Someone purchases a new Mercedes, for example, and I have to explain to them the intricate workings of that. But not everybody is on a technical level where they can really handle super technical terms about technology. Some of these people are just kind of like, normal, like they're old people or something like that, right? Like they're not technologically sophisticated, and I need to dumb that down for them, which is funny because I need to exceed at that kind of stuff. So that's just funny because we're just like the polar opposite in most ways. It's just kind of a curious observation to me.
Yeah, I think that sort of polarization certainly led to probably a because like I think we're relatively similar in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah, I would agree.
Like fundamentally, like character wise, but that's just one thing I think that was just simply shaped by probably the environment in my opinion, like the proclivity to be comfortable and not social, not have like social inhibitions in a way.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably a learned behavior through your own mapping of, your life. And you're just like, and you probably just had the right, you hit the right milestones. You had the right parents, like
right, the right nurture.
You're like a year and a half. You go up, talk to somebody. Your mom's like, "Hey, good job, buddy. Some fucking ice cream." And
I'm like,
you're like, "Oh, this is great." I was like, "That wasn't so bad. I talked to this adult and I got some ice cream. This is sweet." And then perhaps for me, like I have no idea, to be honest, but perhaps I had some sort of, yeah. And to come to think about what my life was rather authoritarian led,
mm-hmm.
and just by the virtue of the place that I was, which is a post-Soviet country. And so
Mm-hmm.
all the adults, even in social situations outside your family, had this just complete, you know, boxed in way of the way you're supposed
like
to be.
like a reservation about themselves, maybe.
More like enforcement. There's a lot of enforcement. Like if you're doing something that's deemed socially unacceptable or you're behaving in a different way, you get essentially punished socially or physically, right? Or verbally, or you get corrected real quick. And maybe it was my inclination or something as a kid. This is before I can even remember because I've always been like this. That I was like, maybe it's just better to curate my message into whatever I believe this person wants me to do or whatever, than and just to skate by and just get my way. Essentially, it's almost like a manipulation type of thing.
You're like playing the system.
Yeah, playing the system. Although that obviously comes and bites you in the ass because a life where you live more like yourself, where it's just truthful and honest, you will get tangled up a lot less because even though you might say some shit that upset somebody, it is truly and honestly how you felt, and it's not something like imagine like what do you think would be worse? You saying something offending someone that you completely meant, or you saying and offending someone with something that you didn't really even mean?
Because you're just trying to pass, right? And then you're like, oh, I think they want to hear this, and you say it, and then it backfires. You're like, well, I have no idea where I need to go because that was a lie to even start with. And like, I'm just trying to say what they want to hear to get me to the next, like, out of this. Yeah. Yeah, that the latter definitely works for sure. And it's such crazy. Like, cultures are just so different. It's that's pretty interesting. From your understandings, it's still very much like that in Russia or like, kind of commie bloc countries to this day.
Good question. Because when you say to this day, right now we're like in the middle of that Ukraine war.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine there's a big, for reference, my family, like I was born in Ukraine. So I got like my dad live in Crimea right now. And then I have family in like Russia, and then I have family in Moldova. So it's really hard to say what the culture is like, especially because I moved out like really before the internet and social communication was done mostly digitally in terms of the social engagement. Uh, I would maybe think that the younger generations are homogenizing themselves globally so they're behaving more like Americans or like Western Europeans or something like that.
Um,
I would imagine that's the case. I don't know, like particularly Moldova. Russia is probably a slightly more difficult to do because you're living under a government where you can't say particular things or else you go to jail. You know what I mean? You can't be a certain way. Like you can't be gay in Russia. You go to jail. Like
no.
it's so yeah. It depends. I guess it depends on which country you're talking about. It's vastly different in in all of them.
Hmm. Yeah, my understanding of it is that it's still very much like that. It's still pretty reserved, and that there's a lot of just, it's like almost still kind of communist a little bit in a lot of ways. Like that mentality just never really left. I guess it takes a long time for the generations to pass and for those opinions and ideas of kind of what like day-to-day life has to change.
Right. Um, and in a more free society, the changes um, allowed to happen faster, I guess, or I guess it's more, the whatever the substrate of the social environment is more ripe for like change, particularly because the internet allows people to connect. And
Well, and I would think, oh, I'm sorry to cut you off. Please continue.
no, please go ahead.
I would think that the internet is probably more of a Western, like the Western culture is probably way more dominant on the internet as well, right? Would that kind of ring true to you as well? Do you think?
Yeah, because you have anonymity to a certain degree. And when you have anonymity, you're more likely to say something that if you do live in a country where you're not allowed to say it, you're more likely to say it there than you are anywhere in your physical environment. And even though you can be tracked or whatever, there's still ways around it, especially for sophisticated people.
Man, you know what's funny is I had a friend who's Chinese and he went to visit China for a little bit to see his family over there, and he had to communicate with us on a VPN.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like kind of a big deal. And like, it was super funny because we were trolling him and we were saying particularly anti Chinese things. And he was like, guys, please, please, I don't want to go to the gulags. Like, he was like, I have a VPN and it's a pretty good VPN, but it's not the best VPN. So if you guys could just relax with that a little bit. He didn't actually want to get like captured by the Chinese secret police and have his social credit destroyed, which is really sad. If I didn't laugh, I would cry. Kind of thing.
Yeah,
It's so funny.
that that it's crazy to just glaze by a subject. You casually just threw in social credit score in China. It's so hard not to be like, holy fuck, like isn't that fucked up?
Yeah.
But honestly, I just don't really have the mental energy because it is so. First of all, it's fucked up, and second of all, the level of oppression and just sadness and like,
absolutely,
it's
man. It's a whole different place, and that's like something that I think Americans are kind of famous for is being like very insular, right? Like Americans are usually mocked for being not particularly worldly about like other cultures and like the things that like other people go through, myself included. The most I've ever been out of the country is Canada, Vancouver up north of Washington, which is like America light anyway, basically. That I just like as a pretty what's the word I'm trying to look for? What's it like when a government is like very like they don't want to like branch out from their own countries very much? Isolationist. There it is. That's what I was trying to think. Like, Americans are naturally like pretty isolationist in a lot of ways, and like Western culture is exported a lot where a lot of these like, British countries, Germany and stuff like that, like they kind of naturally pick up Western habits. It's not like you're really going somewhere particularly foreign. In your day-to-day dealings with people on the internet, America just tends to be kind of isolationist. So I naturally just kind of lack the understanding of what it's like to be have a Chinese citizenship and have an American citizenship and go to China and just have the massive culture shock of what that's like.
Yeah, you know what kind of just I guess came to me is your personality trait of being able to speak to authority figures, to be yourself, to express yourself in whatever situations. That's super American. That is something that America cultivates. And and just doing that quick little analysis, like on myself, right? When I was thinking, like, I wonder particularly why I'm not like that. It's because I lived under an authoritarian regime in a sense, right? Because it's top down. It was like the government that used to be the Soviet Union collapsed right before I was born. It's not like the shit goes away like that. Like the people have lived their whole lives into that kind of thing, and they're suppressing it. And then babies are born, and they're particularly susceptible, like probably I was, to that kind of treatment. And like I'm like, oh fuck, I gotta not step on anyone's toes. I gotta make sure everyone's
cool. Holy shit, they're gonna fucking put me in gulag if I don't know.
Right. And that kind of suppression, right, created, cultivated this kind of I guess behavior style. But where Americans, at least classical Americans, right? Not sure about what's going on nowadays, but classical Americans were endowed with it. And just, I mean, just imagine the gun blazing cowboy fucking knocking down the door, just a superhero of a man. Like that is not only confident, it's almost delusion.
Right. It's a caricature.
Yeah, it's like, but having that confidence in yourself, it's probably not a coincidence that this nation, America, has produced the greatest innovations of all time, and by far exceeds, all other countries. We are the most diverse. That doesn't hurt either. Bringing all these people from different places, but then also giving them that American boost. Like, yeah, you could for me, for example. I always wonder what kind of person would I be if I never moved here.
If you were Moldovan, 100%.
Dude, I would literally pay money to like watch a movie about my, watch what a 30-year-old me right now would be doing.
Yeah.
Honestly, I have no idea. I have no idea what kind of person I'd be like. But it sure as hell probably wouldn't be like I am now.
Right.
Don't know to which point, but yeah, America is this great force multiplier, accelerator. It's just all this just potential energy just sitting here to be grabbed. And the one I guess blind spot that has is when you are so confident, it's difficult for you to understand other people's perspective when they're not like that. Right. So when somebody is maybe more reserved or can't, like myself, like the typical, it would be like, it's sort of, you begin to otherize people, which is a thing that happened, right? Because, when Americans like see a foreign person and they're like, barely able to speak English.
Classic. They're like fucking China man.
Yeah. And that, racism and all that stuff, it definitely happened. And I think in no small part due to the fact that you think you're superior and you have all this confidence in some sort of way, which, by the way, could necessarily not be like wrong if it comes to like sports or like, accomplishments or physics or rocket science or whatever it is. But if you press that throttle too hard and you don't check your humanity, right, because it gives you a superpower like that.
Yeah, you just bulldoze over people with like legitimate differences, and then you just like toss aside, lived experience and things like that.
Yeah, you should. I could get you, or maybe you could, get a copy of my mom wrote a book. I don't know if I told you about this, but she wrote a book about.
I have heard about this. Yeah.
Yeah, it's called Family Order Bride, and it's about basically her life in Moldova and how she met my American stepdad
Yeah.
and their journey and how they got married
Who
and how
also
the family moved here.
had a Corvette.
Wrong stepdad.
Oh, damn it. All right. Well, one of them had a Corvette.
No, he still does. He had a Z06, like an 04.
Yeah.
Z06, a red one that he.
It was red with the red LEDs in the gills on the front of the car. I remember that car specifically. I desperately yearned to go for a drive in that car before I ever had done any of the car stuff that I did, and I never got to go ride it.
Oh man, that sucks. It was great. I took my wife out like on a date once, and he
in that car.
Yeah, and it I don't know, it just feels cool, dude. Like you just
Yeah, it does.
get in there, you just like clunk, you're just like 400 horsepower, just rear wheel drive, and then you just
it's like it's glowing.
It's just definitely a very cool car.
Yeah.
Yeah, very very badass feeling. But so quickly back to the book.
Yes.
My stepdad, and his name was David. He passed away in 2006. But he was the most American you could possibly be. He exuded I don't even know how to explain this. The book is so well written. I don't know how my mom has all these crazy intimate details of like what happened that many years ago.
Because that is the curse of women, is to just have intimate knowledge of everything a man ever did to you.
Right. Well, it's just like about her life and just But she just captured him so well, and it was amazing for me to read as an adult.
Because you recognize it very true to life.
Right, and when I was perceiving that, I was Moldovan, Russian, right?
Sure.
Living there,
young boy,
American person. Yeah, I was like 9 years old, and then coming here, now living in America for like 20 years, I'm reading this book from this American's perspective with these like Moldovan kids and this Russian family or whatever it is. and he's just so American. He comes in and my mom's like, hey, like, so, if you're hungry, like we got this place. And he's like, and then he sees a McDonald's. He's like, what? You guys have McDonald's here? And then he just fucking goes over there. And she's like, McDonald's out of all places? And he's like, yeah, they have really good burgers. And then, you know what I mean? Just like super unapologetic. Just doesn't give a fuck, does whatever he wants. He like, man, it's just so very well written. You should check it out. But
I will.
Fascinating.
Actually, yeah. That is super interesting. Dude, the world's a crazy place. There's a movie. I'm trying to think what it's called. It's like Everything Everywhere All at Once or something like that. It's very much like a similar vein to what you're talking about.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I'm not even going to bother going into any more detail than that, but something to check out as well.
All right. Very well.
Yeah.
Will do.
Man, that's wild. And that's something to me personally, as someone who's been your friend for a long time, is very mysterious. Because that's like a part of you that I just really don't know a ton about. Like I know you from high school, and that's about as far back as I know. You're as American as anybody I've ever known. So I'd be curious. Are you mentioned personally in the book a ton?
Yeah, there's a bunch of scenes of me as a kid, and I'm like super funny.
Scenes of you as a kid.
Yeah. It's really funny. Like I'm a comedian, dude. I'm crying like literally every time
You're the comic relief.
A joke. Yes, I am. I think I might be the comic relief, because I've always had this obnoxious fucking thing where I make incredibly inappropriate jokes all the time because I just think things are funny. That's like the one place where I will actually get into social trouble. Like whatever, tunings I got, that's tuned down just enough to where I'll say some shit and be like, oh Jesus, I should like that was totally not the appropriate thing to say.
You know what's so funny is like I'm very similar to you in that sense, where like I really love the joke that's maybe like 10% too far. That's my favorite joke. The one that gets me in just a tiny bit of trouble. And a perfect example was, a while ago, I was with a couple in their brand new Mercedes, and I was explaining some of the features of the car to them. And there's a specific feature in the car where if a pedestrian steps out in front of the car can actually recognize like a foreign intrusion into its path, and it will perform like an emergency braking maneuver. Like it will stop. And I was explaining this feature to this couple. It was like, I don't know, a middle-aged woman and a middle-aged man. And I was like, yeah, so, if a person or a bicyclist like steps out in front of your car, the car's going to perform an emergency stop. I'm like, which is too bad because it should just speed up for bicyclists. And the lady's like, the guy laughs and the lady doesn't laugh at all. And she like looks back and she's like, we're bicyclists. I was like, no.
I mean, even so, they should be more,
Yeah.
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 If you, dude, that's. Remember you told me that Tony Hinchcliffe came into your car shop?
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that day and I guess
just and what kind of happened? Yeah, so Tony Hinchcliffe, comedian, friend of Joe Rogan, right? And you know what's super funny is I met Tony and I've met his girlfriend. I'm trying to convince him to make her his fiance. Anyway, so I met her too. Super, super cool girl. And she's told me a little bit about Tony as well, which is really funny. So anyway, Tony, it was literally Christmas Eve. He was the only person who came to the dealership, and the dude is very ostentatious. So he just dresses ridiculous. He has tight gray jeans and like big oversized Timberland boots. And by the way, Tony Hinchcliffe drives a Corvette. He has a neon yellow C8 Corvette with like the wing kit and on it. It's like the most absurd, loud, obnoxious Corvette that you've ever seen, and I love it, and he loves it. Anyway, so just Tony drives a Corvette, which is cool. I drive a Corvette, Tony drives a Corvette. I'm just saying. Anyway, so he comes in, and he's the only customer in the entire store, and the store is already pretty low on staff, right? It's not like a full day where every single person who could possibly be working is working. It's like a skeleton crew. And he is just cracking jokes about everything. Like he's giving everybody the hardest time that you could possibly give people a hard time at the car dealership, which is great because everybody who works at a car dealership is the biggest tool ever and totally deserves to get roasted by Tony Hinchcliffe. And he knows every button to push perfectly. And we have a cafe, because this is Mercedes-Benz, so there's a cafe in the middle of the store, and I'm sitting at the cafe, and I actually don't really know Tony very well. Like, I'm not like a fan of Tony. You are, I'm not, which is too bad, because if it was like Dave Chappelle, everybody would know who Dave Chappelle is and be crazy about it, right? But Tony's like kind of someone that you might get away with not really knowing super well, but he's in there. He's at the cafe, and I go up and I'm just listening to Tony because he's just like riffing about everything, right? He's just like the funniest dude ever, and he's giving the finance manager a particularly hard time for how long it's taking to get him into finance for being the only fucking person in the entire fucking day there at the store. He's like, bro, what's going on? I'm the only one here. Like, how come every time I go to spend money, it takes forever? Like, he's just like wondering why it's taking forever for him to purchase this car. And by the way, he's purchasing a beautiful SL 500 for his girlfriend, which is he's not buying a new car, by the way. He's buying a classic Mercedes-Benz. Like a 1998 Mercedes-Benz, which is pretty obscure. Like, it's not a car that we have particularly often. But it's a very astute eye of him to purchase that Mercedes-Benz because it's one of the best Mercedes-Benz they ever made. And he buys it for his girlfriend as a as a gift, as a Christmas gift. And she gets a classic Mercedes. Dude's balling, right? Drives a Corvette. That's all I need to say. And he's giving the finance manager a hard time. And I think my favorite part of the conversation I had with him was a very humanizing part, which I think is what we all hope for when we meet someone like kind of famous, is that we have like a genuine human interaction with them, right? Because that's kind of what is significant. It's cool to meet a famous person and like get them to sign something or take a picture with them, but it's another thing to have like a heart-to-heart moment with them. And I found my little edge in there to have this heart-to-heart moment with him, and it was about being a expecting father. So, you know, my fiance is 18 weeks pregnant as it stands now. At the time, 15 weeks or something like that. And I was talking to him about being a person, right? And I was like, oh, you know, like, what's new with me? Like, I'm gonna have a kid, and that's a pretty crazy thing for me. And he was like, yeah, I've been thinking about that a little bit, you know. So I asked him, I was like, well, how old are you? And he goes, I'm 38. And I go, I'm 28. And he goes like, wow. You know, he's like, if I had a kid right now, I would be like 50 when they're 18, you know, or whatever, pardon my math. And I was like, yeah, man, you should do it. You know, he moved from California to Texas, and he brought his girlfriend with him. And I was like, man, if you brought her with you, that's pretty important. That's saying something, you know, like I moved from Washington to Texas, and, you know, my fiance brought me with her, to be honest. You know, she took me along for the ride. And that's pretty important. I think that means a lot. I was like, you should consider having a kid or doing that. And he's like, yeah. And I think I will. You know, he kind of like had that, like he took a second and I kind of thought about it for a second. And that was my little bit of experience with Tony Hinchcliffe. As melodramatic as that might sound, but it was cool to have like just a genuine interaction with like a person. And I ended up meeting his fiance later, and I recognized the car. And the car came in. I was like, "That's Tony!" And I ran out there to like see who it was, and it was I guess it wasn't his fiance, sorry, his girlfriend. And she was just like super fucking cool. She was like, I'm gonna be honest, she came in for a bit of a woman moment where the check engine light was on, and the check engine light was on because she didn't tighten down the gas cap all the way. No, and she was like concerned that something was like broken with the car, and it was just like, yeah, you just didn't tighten down the gas cap all the way. It's just like, fuck.
No. Well,
yeah,
honestly, that's an honest mistake, though.
It kind of is, yeah.
Out of all the other things, you know.
Well, look, it's a new car. It's a classic car. It's kind of strange compared to new cars. Like, yeah, it's a totally simple mistake to make.
Plus,
but admittedly,
I would never put that to even me. I'd be like, check engine light. That's weird.
You're like, oh fuck, guys.
Yeah, if I didn't tighten that thing all the way, just shut. Yeah. I would never put. Although I do have like an OBD, you know, or OBD reader, so I could, you know,
run the code or something like that, right?
But if I didn't, yeah, I'd take it like AutoZone or whatever. But if you just bought it from a place, you might as well take it back there. Like, yo, what?
Yeah, exactly.
But
yeah, it's not the worst thing ever. But it is what you might define as a classic woman moment. And she's a cool enough person that she would completely agree that was totally a woman moment for her.
Oh yeah.
But she was like the coolest gal ever. And I sat down with her and I was just like, I talked to Tony. She was like, yeah. What was that like? I was like, dude, he's the fucking maniac. And she's like, yeah, he's crazy. And I was like, we talked about kids. And she's like, oh, yeah, you talked about kids? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, did you put in a good word for me? I was like, absolutely. And she was like, cool. You know, and that was like, that's the gist of it. But like, I'd like to think that maybe I have some. If Tony Hinchcliffe has a kid in the next year, that would die to death. That was my piece of it.
Yeah, just
right.
Maybe if it's a boy, he'll name him Chase. I don't know if he's obliged legally, but
dude, that would be crazy. That would be next level, and I would absolutely take responsibility. Although I highly doubt he remembers me.
I guess if anybody would be playing with their kids' names, you know, in some sort of funny way, it might be him. What I watch Kill Tony, and just if you're for those maybe perhaps listening, if you're not familiar with Kill Tony, it's they have this panel of I wouldn't necessarily even say judges, but of professional comedians, or maybe they even had like Alex Jones on there one time. They just have like whoever on alongside Tony, who's the host, and Brian Redband, who does it, the technical stuff. And Brian Redband
used to do the Joe Rogan Experience.
Yes, he did. Yeah, he was on the first episode. They co-created, I suppose, this podcasting thing together. Yeah. But so it's basically Tony hosting this thing where they have regulars come in and do a new minute of stand-up like every week, which is brutal.
So brutal.
Brutal. And then new, perhaps, or experienced, maybe seasoned. It could be anybody. And they literally put their name in a hat. And they just sit there, they go through the hat, pick out a name, call the person up, they come up and do their minute. And whether or not they bomb, Tony every single time fucking annihilates them. He destroys them so hard. Like, and I haven't seen that many, and I'm gonna watch more. But yeah, he like has this insane capability to map the entire night. So he remembers what everybody fucking said, and he's
ChatGPT, but comedy version.
He's a comedy. Yeah, it's absolutely incredible because a comic will come up, they'll finish their set, and then he'll just crack a joke tying in a previous dude that was like 3 times ago, and then he fucks them both up, and it just like simultaneously a 2-for-1.
Yeah.
And I was watching Kill Tony right before I went to a camping trip with David and my wife and his wife. And I was just wired in that zone, and I just came cracking jokes, dude. I was fucking David up. I was lighting him up like a Christmas tree. And then he's like, dude, what the fuck? And I was like, my bad, dude. I just watched it. And I was like, I thought we could just kind of spar back and forth, but I understand this is kind of one-sided.
Like he wasn't ready for the smoke.
I said in a lot less words than that, but basically I was like, oh, okay. I would tone that down. And I was like, damn, dude, that was like kind of dangerous. I got wired there. That's the one thing I would love to do. I'm certainly a comedian, and I've never done stand-up or anything, but just like being on that like panel, just like while other people go up or whatever, or even if I'm the one who does it, and then it just has to sit there.
And then you get roasted.
Yeah. I would love to be part of that so that I could, try to throw a few jabs in there while I'm just getting fucking wrecked, because you're not going to beat Tony. That guy's been, I don't even know how many, like, it's been like 10 years, like every day or whatever, every week that he does that show, plus all his stand-up and everything. He's sharp, he's like a samurai sword, but I think that I could throw a punch that at least, kind of get him to like, oh.
You might be able to counter jab a little bit.
Yeah. Like 50-50 that one of my shots will land.
Right.
But
you either completely choke or you get a 7 out of 10 comeback.
Oh, I think that I can go up as high as like 9.
Oh,
on a comeback.
Particularly confidence.
But
so you know what's, speaking of comedy, Joe Nelson does comedy now.
Yes, dude. Yeah, I saw that.
Wow.
I've been meaning to actually go see him.
Something crazy.
Because that is super cool. Actually, that's the first person I know in my personal life that has anything to do with comedy.
Yeah. Yeah, you're kind of a piece of shit for not going to see him. You should go do that.
Yeah, I guess so, right?
You kind of are compelled because as someone who's not there to go be there for Joe, like, you have to do that for me now as well.
Right. No, and for me as well, because I love Joe. He was absolutely the type of guy who I would imagine going into comedy.
100%. Yeah.
It's fantastic. I actually wrote on my New Year's resolution just to try it out. I was like, write 5 minutes of stand up.
Uh-huh.
I haven't even started because I've been doing all this other shit and starting this podcast and everything. But every now and then I'll pull out my notes and I'll write a joke idea. And so I'm hoping by the end of some period of time, might have something.
might have 5 minutes. Imagine the guys who do an hour. You know, I have one I have one comedy joke, one real genuine bit, and I'm not gonna say it because
Right.
it's racist. Let's be honest. I'm just kidding. And I thought about bringing it up to Tony, and I was scared of getting absolutely not. I was scared of just having my dreams flesh. I couldn't. I couldn't do it.
You should have, dude. You should have thrown it out there, and then you get roasted, dude. It's part of
Yeah.
play with fire. You gotta
And get burned.
you gotta press
Yeah.
play, dude.
Yeah.
I get you. I don't know.
It was a lot. There was a lot going on. I didn't want to impose too, because I've met a good deal of like famous people, and like the very last thing I want to do is be cliche, right? Like that's the very last thing I want to do is be like, oh Tony, oh you do Kill Tony? Here's my Kill Tony bit, right? It's just super cringe.
Yeah, it has to be natural. You have to
Right.
like what I would do is if I was getting roasted or if I was there in the car shop, the only thing you can really do is try to fucking defend yourself, right? You have to, because if you just take it, that's like, come on, dude. It's your prerogative as if you are willing to be an interesting person and do risky behavior. If someone comes in throwing fucking punches, it's also just way more fun. It's just way more fun. I've always like
Yeah, I thought saying slinging jokes.
when 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 I was a kid, I played a lot of RuneScape, and I would try to go head to head with people with like roast off, like on chat, and I was like really fast at typing, and I had pleasure, a lot of pleasure, just talking shit back and forth between somebody.
Would you be jealous of me if I had said my joke to Tony and he roasted me a little bit?
I think I would have been proud of you.
Then by default I've disappointed you
That's
by not stepping up to the challenge. I'll do it next time. I promise.
okay. Yeah, next time you meet fucking a professional comedian, fucking idiot. Well, then again,
To be like, Joe Rogan came to the shop the other day and I gave him the worst joke ever. And he told me it was racist and offensive and never to say that shit ever again. Thanks, Serghei.
yeah. You live in Austin though, so
It's true.
if there wasn't a person that I know that would meet us, and you literally, there we go. You got one under your belt already. You're collecting those things like tabs.
Yeah, 100%. Victory marks on a P-51 Mustang.
Yeah, the Austin is a place that like my coworker moved to. I had another person I worked with that lived there, and when I talk to people about like relocating out of like the Washington area, that's a place that I've been recommended the most by far.
So it's very liberal for sure. It's like it's a pocket within Texas. I've come to find out. Specifically, the area I'm in is Georgetown. It's potato tomato or tomato tomato type thing. Georgetown is kind of incorporated in like Western, so you're not wrong by saying Western. But yeah, it's a little bit playing by its own rules, as compared to standard Texas operating procedure, for sure. Because it's funny, you drive about 30 minutes away, and it's like, it's Texas cousin. It's ranch hands, it's cows, steers, which is really funny. Texas is a really curious place too. Like comparing it to Washington, the people they've been super accepting, and what's funny is, so to shed some light on why I left Washington in the first place was because I kind of feel like a bit of a political refugee, to be honest. I was, working a technical mechanical engineering job, and I remember being, I lived in Everett, and I remember being in the apartment with my fiance, and I was on my balcony smoking a cigarette, and I watched a car pull up. There's a bunch of cars parked out on the side of the road. I watched a car pull up, two dudes get out, bash out the window of a pickup truck, open up the hood, steal just a single headlight out of the truck, and then get in the car and leave. I just witnessed this in like a minute's worth of time. And I just remember being like so disgusted at the efficiency of the entire procedure. And like, my Corvette was getting broken into and stuff like that. Homeless people everywhere. And I worked in Seattle, so I'm commuting from Everett to Seattle, just like two fantastic, kind of semi shitholes of Washington, pardon my French. And I just remember being like, man, I'm really tired of having to look over my shoulder. I'm really tired of having everything cost a bunch of money. I'm really tired of watching people tactfully steal just the fucking headlights out of pickup trucks. I'm really tired of like watching all these like politics just completely miss the point of everything that's going on around us, and like waste so much time and energy and resources on things that just like don't matter in any way, and just completely miss the plot of what's going on. And this was around COVID time too, that all this was happening, where our jobs were really getting mixed up with, all the kind of like vaccination requirements and stuff like that. And me and her just kind of together made the decision that it just didn't make sense anymore. It just, and it was a really hard decision for me too, because I love Washington so much as like a place, right? Like I remember being out in the woods and just like standing underneath these 100-foot tall evergreen trees, just completely boxed in by the most beautiful landscape ever. And just being like absolutely memorized with the place that I was in, and like really thinking that this is a really special place. Like I'm sure there's people in the world who wish that they could be here in this forest right now, like having this like authentic nature experience something. So it was like a really hard decision for us to make as well to do that. So all those things combined at the time kind of just like we wanted like a fresh start to kind of get away from all that and kind of live in a place that was maybe like a little bit more free, in the sense of like personal liberties, and like that was a little bit more traditional. And that's kind of why I ended up in Texas. I'm kind of forgetting where this entire tangent went from.
No,
where I was trying to go with
that. I think that's a pretty good point, though. I personally, try to stay out of politics. Tried in
right.
past tense until I had a sort of moment where a close friend of mine was, for what I perceived to exhibit extremist behavior.
It maybe took it too far.
Yeah, just basically this ideology of like, you're either with us or against us. We're fighting for a utopia. That kind of stuff is a very, I guess, enticing thing and way of life for people, especially those that are genuinely good type of people that do want the best. And so they're the most susceptible to sort of being attached to this ideology and doing everything in the name of this ideology and excusing behavior or masking, real consequences that they probably should be facing, whether socially or otherwise. And then all that's reinforced by a social media presence, because they're talking to like-minded people and they're interacting negatively to the people who they perceive to be the enemy.
Well, it's like a feedback loop.
Right. And,
or an echo chamber.
Yeah, and I just think it's such like a false flag type of thing to be polarization, or to be polarized into left and right.
Yeah.
And I've always kind of felt that, but it never really mattered that much until recently, with, just everybody going fucking nuts. There are people on the right, just people on the left. It's just like this crazy thing when we really all know what's happening. It's like the Soviet Union, I think it was Solzhenitsyn. He said, and I think I'm paraphrasing here, but he said something and it's obviously in Russian, so it's all paraphrasing in a sense, but he said we know they're lying. They know we know they're lying. They know they're lying, but they continue to lie. So
Yes.
that's what it is. It is theatrical.
Right.
It is everything that all these people, in my opinion, on the fringes of the left and the right, everything that they believe the government represents or is doing, or whatever entity or whatever business company, whether it's pharmaceutical companies or the tech companies or the media companies or the government or the individual people involved in it.
Powers that be.
It's all just a bunch of fucking bullshit for the optics. And what I mean by that is their priorities, or rather what they say their priorities are, what their moral standings are. It's all just this pseudo created thing to be like, it's sort of like when I was a kid, or, even in my adulthood, until I realized and try to, steer away from this kind of behavior, is to kind of people please. Even if you're doing some other shit, yeah, totally, you're just telling them what they want. It's a form of manipulation, right? And there's just
telling people what they want to hear to kind of pass.
And we know that's
confrontation,
like clear as day, no doubt about it, that's a thing that's happening. The Twitter files are being, just streaming into the public consciousness, and that's that's like actual IMs and emails and unquestionable proof of the thing that we knew was happening.
And manipulation on scale just hitherto undreamt of.
Yeah, and it's just like each individual person needs to start, I guess, looking at themselves and being like, where do I want to be in this pivotal time where shit might go off the rails of, whatever way. And we don't even know what way. We were talking about AI earlier. We were talking about this weird technology frequency thing. We're talking about
man-made horrors beyond comprehension.
And we still, and by the way, it's still all the while that we haven't really dealt with the implications of the internet, right? We still, not only that, but the internet's evolving. So we have all of that. We have the social shit changing. People need to be exceptionally strong right now. This is the time where you can't be weak, you can't be passive, you can't pop a fucking edible and watch Netflix all the time. There's nothing wrong with yeah. Let me just say, there's nothing wrong with doing any of that, but at the same time, you got to be honing your skills, whatever it is. You got to dive into a passion. You got
to be American. You gotta be.
Yeah, I don't really know, and that's the only thing that I can think of doing. So at the society level, I can't. What else are you gonna do? You're gonna lobby against the government. They'll just lie.
No, here's what you're gonna do: is you're gonna have kids, and you're gonna raise them as honestly and best you can, and you're gonna do your best to instill in them a sense of justice and responsibility and self-responsibility. And you're just going to hope for the best. And you're going to hope that your kids make kids who make kids who make kids who share the same values. That's really the best we've got for you right now. And, that was something that was naturally alluring about Texas, is that there's a bit of fuck you, come and take it kind of vibe, right? Like is it the Betsy Ross flag? Is that the, don't step on snake one or whatever? Where it's kind of like some standing up for kind of what you know to be right, and some self-reliance, which is really exemplary and is actually pretty unique in the United States too. Texas has a lot of things that is really unique about it, and that was naturally alluring to me too. And I'll tell you what, I came to Texas. I don't know anybody. I don't really have any friends. I don't really have any professional friends. I do now, but when I first came here, I didn't. And I will tell you that every single person who I interviewed for work with, or who I told my story, really gave me the benefit of the doubt and gave me an opportunity to prove myself and to say that I could do the things that I told them I could do. and didn't really judge me too harshly for the place that I came from, and just gave me the opportunity uh, to raise myself up on my bootstraps a little bit, right? And that's pretty fucking remarkable. And there's a lot of people in this world who wouldn't do that for you.
Yeah, I think that is community is something that I don't know if I think I do currently lack, I suppose. Another reason for the podcast is actually I'm hoping that people listen to this and have some sort of feeling of kinship with me, like I do when I listen to podcasts.
Right.
And then just
you feel like one of the homies.
Yeah, and then just engage in dialogue with me, because the best way to explore this world is like take it, right now is like you take advantage of this digital thing that's going on, and you communicate with as many people in a genuine way as possible, especially if you're coming together. Like, for example, like say you and I decide to do a follow-on podcast, but we want to focus in on a topic, right? Say we wanted to do the history of energy or something like that. I generally know, like, there's coal, there's nuclear fusion, I guess the nuclear power, which I guess fission, right? I generally know that stuff, but it'd be super cool to learn. And what I could do is I could just go Wikipedia, YouTube, whatever, which are fantastic resources. Like those are amazing resources, especially YouTube is outstanding. And
it's incredible.
Documentaries, whatever. But what's even a cooler way is to get together with somebody who you genuinely enjoy talking to and be like, hey, let's learn about this subject, and let's get in front of the camera and discuss this thing, knowing that there's possibly an audience that needs to learn from this as well. So then you have like a multi-dimensional thing that's just like pressuring you into, you've really got to learn the content and know what you're talking about if you're doing a specialized video about it. And so content creation has become a multifaceted thing where you can learn, you can have community, you can do all these things, and it's like the most sophisticated version of this thing. It's just like you get what I'm saying? Like it's an
100%.
incredible tool.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, man, that's the incredible part about all of it. YouTube, it's so funny you say YouTube because, man, I watch so much YouTube. I don't know if did you watch Lex Friedman, Mr. Beast, by the way?
Yes.
Were you able to finish that? Wow.
And sorry to interrupt, but I just realized I'm kind of channeling him right now with this. I don't have the full suit or tie.
You're the Lex. Yeah. Do you know who Michael Malice is? Did you ever watch and he was like the counter Lex, where Lex wears a
yes
black suit, white shirt, black tie, and then Malice was white suit, black shirt, white tie.
Yeah.
Super fun.
I have Michael Malice just published a book.
Yes. The White Pill.
The White Pill. I have it. I have it right here.
I haven't read it. I didn't know it was out.
Yeah, I haven't started it because I'm currently finishing up a book, but I'm about to dive into it. And I read like the first couple of pages, or just because I was like, I got to do something.
Like, I got the book in my hands. I got to flip through it. Yeah.
And it's talking about like Ayn Rand and communism, and like, that's the thing. For the longest time, even though I came from that place, I assimilated super well to the United States, and so I became very Americanized in a sense, and kind of secluded from that history. And I was more interested in playing games and learning. And I didn't really have like a mentor or someone to look up to kind of steer me. So I just wasted a lot of time in my youth doing unproductive things. But
do you think that like Americanism and like American culture is like a natural state of being a little bit? Do you think that it's like what do they call it? The carrier wave through a multitude of cultures, if that makes sense.
No, I get what you're saying. Well, first off, to just to be like very technical, I do think it's a natural way because we're doing it. So in any of these ways of living or government or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
it is all natural because we can go there. One of the the niche of humans is niche switching, right? As
Right.
Brett Weinstein would say, who's an evolutionary biologist, um, and so it is natural in a sense, but I think maybe oh, what would answer that question would be like, how likely is it, or how abundant is it, or what's the path? And I think that this is by far the exception as far as our history,
The American experiment
yeah,
is the exception.
as far as we understand our history, the this level of freedom of self governance in a sense, that allowed this thing to flourish is by it just didn't happen 99.99% of the time because evolution had to get to a certain, and now that it's here, by the way, there's still countries like North Korea and China and Russia, and so
Right.
it's not necessarily the case that just because it's here now everyone's going to adapt to it because they see the output. It's more like every single person has their own interest, every country has their own interest, and they're going to execute according to that interest within their power. And so there's still this, like, America essentially emerged, or we're like this fucking like new age like type of existence, type of being, and but we're still surrounded in this dangerous place of
Sure.
I just refer to everybody besides America dangerous.
Dangerous.
uh, but to be fair, I think America and the freedom that it has, and countries like this, are the only way, through to prosperity and genuine happiness. So we have to pass through whatever this is probably first to get to the other place.
Yeah, for sure. That's pretty profound. The United States is definitely a unique experience. It's one that I wish I could experience from the outside, which unfortunately I just, brother, I almost American is freaking bush like cousin. Like I just can't help it. Like I wish that maybe I could have been British or Moldovan or Australian or Chinese and experience American culture and just be like shocked and have a different perspective about it. Because for me, it's natural as apple pie,
Yeah,
and I wish I had some perspective. I just don't.
it's like being born into a rich family.
Just being American,
Yeah, you you can turn out good in the sense of like not in the things you accomplish, but like
the leg up that a rich family provides you, or be spoiled.
right. I guess that's what you can be spoiled, or you know
Have a leg up in the sense of opportunities to
right.
go to a good school and have nice things and have a stress-free environment compared to getting whipped in Moldovan elementary school for not doing your homework.
Yeah, and no, it was pretty brutal. Yeah, we had this. I remember this girl who was like from this poorer family, and
So she must be really poor.
yes, yeah, she was. And I remember she got accused of stealing something, and I don't know if she actually did it. But the teacher made her like take all her clothes off and be in her underwear in front of the class.
How old is this girl exactly? Like, what's the time?
We're talking
What's the time period? How old is this girl?
we're talking about like second grade for me, so I was like 9. I was 8 or 9 years old. So she was 8 or 9 years old.
But this is like
The
1990. 2007 or something.
Maybe 99 or 2000.
Sure.
Maybe 2000. And
Because she was.
yes, and I remember me and one of my other buddies, we both put our heads down and we didn't look just out of respect. And but I just remember like her face when that was happening. It was just like pure terror. Like she's traumatized, absolutely and indefinitely.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I don't even know why I mentioned that, but yeah, or why.
I mean, it's well, because I mean, because for us, that's something that, like, again, you're a father, I'm an expecting father. Imagining that happening to your girl, like, you would burn the school down, right? Maybe not literally, but you would be on the warpath if something like that happened. I mean, you would instantly just be pushed to the absolute limit of your reins, and like, there's a lot of options that would be on the table that might not have been on the table otherwise, right? Just to make peace with that situation. Like, imagine how upset you would be if you heard about something like that happen to one of your family members, right? You would just be on the absolute warpath.
Yeah, or like my daughter. That is, one of the weak spots of being a parent is that susceptibility for your child to be in a genuinely terrible, frightening.
Right. And you being helpless to do anything about it. To relate back to your podcast with Vitaly, you talked about, I don't know if it was you or Vitaly, but you said that, like, having a family was, like, a type of weakness. Do you remember that? A little bit of that conversation?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with that 100%. I totally see the logic that you guys are talking about, where, like, yeah, because then you have things that can be taken away from you. You do have the weakness, right? If someone kidnaps your daughter, you have a weakness in that way, right? If someone hurts your family, you have a weakness in that way. You have more mouths to feed and all those things. But I think that there's actually, like, that there's a lot of strength in that as well. Like, there's a lot of things that you might be compelled to do otherwise that you wouldn't have been if you didn't have the family. Like, there is lengths that you would go to protect your family, to provide for your family. There are things that your family can provide for you that they might not have done otherwise if they didn't have the family structure that they did as well. And I'm not so sure that I would be willing to call it a weakness so candidly. No. I think it's more of a strength, honestly.
I get it. I think it's your greatest weakness and your greatest strength.
Yes, absolutely. And absolutely.
It's like good versus evil, depending on how you think, but perhaps good is greater than evil. Some infinities are higher than others, are bigger than others.
Yes.
And perhaps it's something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just slightly disappointed to hear no defense of the family structure. I was like,
sorry if perhaps came out.
I was like, oh, the family is the greatest strength at the same time. I was like, yeah, totally. Because, like, there are people where if things happen to them, like, I know that I could rise to a level of, and I would rise above any challenge that was presented to my family. Just do some next level stuff. Like, what's his face from Taken? He's like, I have a particular set of skills, or like. You would just become a hitman overnight to do, something that you needed to do for your family. You would just figure it out. You would sit down with ChatGPT and you would type up dastardly plans in a proficient manner that the world has never seen. The government has got to be listening to those things too, by the way. Just
they have to do everything.
Everybody's machinations, inner machinations.
Yeah.
On that note, I think, Serghei, that I have successfully VR chatted everyone. I have VR chatted the audience.
Yeah, perhaps it's, let's see, it's oh boy, it's 1:33 a.m. for me, so it must be 3:33 a.m.
3:33 a.m. for me.
Yeah. Well,
Yep.
okay, sir. It was great having you on. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. It was really good to have the talk. I'm really glad that we were able to sit down and do it, and do it for so long too. That was really great.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll end it here.
See you next time, guys.